Thank you so much to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. Manta Sleep specializes in comfortable and functional sleep masks that have helped me get great and uninterrupted sleep. If you're anything like me, you may also be a light sleeper with a tendency to stay up too late watching horror movies. Well, with the help of Manta Sleep and their pro nap movement, I've been getting all the rest I need just in time for spooky season. I've been using the silk sleep mask with adjustable cups for about a month now, and this is the only sleep mask I've tried that checks all my boxes. It's very comfortable, it blocks out all of the light in the room, and it stays on my head all night. Manta also sent me their cooling cups, which you can throw right in the freezer and use anytime you want to soothe your sinuses or puffy eyes. I've also been using this travel-friendly white noise machine right next to my bed that blocks outside noise, and that paired with the mask, I've honestly been sleeping incredibly well lately. So if you want to join the pro nap movement and check out Manta Sleep, make sure you use the link in my description and use code SKYGAE, SKYGAE, at checkout to get 10% off your order. That's SKYGAE, SKYGAE, for 10% off your order using the link in the description. Nowadays, American Horror Story is known as a long-spanning horror anthology show that has a knack for casting headline-inducing stars and pushing the boundaries of horror on television. But today, I want to take you back to the very beginning, the first season of AHS, long before it became the franchise we know, some of us love, and some of us love to hate. But if you're new here, my name is Skyler Gaetano, and lately I've been making a lot of videos like this one, diving deep into some of my favorite TV shows, and soon I will be covering some films as well. I like to take you guys through the history of a project from its production, and then take you through the plot while injecting a lot of fun facts and or bonus content that may be overlooked by some casual fans, and of course my opinion whether you like it or not. So if that type of content is up your alley, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and make sure you stay tuned after the last episode of Murder House to watch a bonus section of the deep dive going through the truly awful sequel episodes in American Horror Stories, the spin-off. And now, let's travel back in time to the very first time the words American Horror Story were publicly strung together, February 17th, 2011. It was on that day that FX announced it would be ordering a pilot for an hour-long drama titled American Horror Story from two producers who were hot off the success of the first two seasons of a little show called Glee. Of course, those guys are Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk, who, long before Glee, already had a relationship with the network FX. Murphy created Nip Tuck, a successful and boundary-pushing medical drama in its own right that ran for 6 seasons. It was during that time that Murphy began a close creative relationship with Falchuk, who started working on Nip Tuck as a writer, but by its final season, he had worked his way up to executive producer. In the midst of the show's success, Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk actually wrote and shot another pilot in 2008 for a similarly stylized show entitled Pretty Handsome, which saw Joseph Fiennes playing a transgender woman faced with the challenge of coming out to her family. But after that pilot was completed, FX decided not to pick it up to series, and a 2018 article with Vogue had Murphy pointing to FX being concerned that its advertisers would not support the subject matter. In hindsight, Pretty Handsome was clearly ahead of its time. However, based on the negative reactions I've read to some of the trans storylines that made their way onto Glee shortly afterwards, it might be for the best that the Ryan Murphy of 2008 wasn't given a full series to explore transgender issues. Murphy would continue to attempt to get transgender stories on TV, and he was eventually quite successful with Pose, which he launched alongside Falchuk and producer Stephen Canals exactly 10 years later in 2018, thanks to including a lot of transgender creatives in terms of writing, directing, and acting. I love Pose Season 1 and Season 2. But the network's decision to not move forward with Pretty Handsome in 2008 at least partly contributed to the inception of Murphy and Falchuk's next huge hit, Glee, which they co-created alongside Ian Brennan, who approached the duo with the initial idea. And if you watch the Pretty Handsome pilot, it's clear some of those storylines were also the guinea pigs for some familiar Glee storylines as well. Essentially, around this time, Murphy and Falchuk went from controversial and boundary-pushing shows over on a premium cable network to a relatively more wholesome teen drama aimed towards a family audience, after FX told them they might have pushed the boundaries a bit too far. So, during Glee's height, it was a pretty unexpected move to attempt to launch a sleazy horror show, but to the producers themselves, it probably seemed natural to go back to their roots of pushing boundaries with FX now that their careers had a lot more of a safety net with Glee's massive success. In other words, through the failure of Pretty Handsome, they shifted gears and struck gold with Glee, which then allowed them to take a risk by producing the pilot of American Horror Story. It's also worth noting that a completely separate show, The Walking Dead, had recently started to change the landscape of horror on television with its then recent first season, which the success of certainly helped FX make the call to go all in on AHS. And go all in they did, because on July 18th, 2011, it was announced that American Horror Story was picked up for 13 episodes set to go into production on the 28th, forcing a tight and complex shooting schedule in correspondence with Glee Season 3. As production began and writing continued, some integral AHS voices were publicly added to the mix, like writers Tim Minear, Jennifer Salt, James Wong, and Jessica Sharzer, and of course, a star-studded cast began to take shape as well, with the first ever American Horror Story cast member to be announced being Connie Britton, hot off of the heels of Friday Night Lights. But I'll dive deeper into the season's cast as we start breaking down the episodes themselves, and before we do that, I want to emphasize a crucial detail about AHS Season 1. It was not promoted as an anthology series in any way, shape, or form, and its subtitle of Murder House actually comes from the dialogue of the show itself, and no official teasers, DVD releases, or posters actually called this season Murder House. So definitely keep that fact in mind as we go through this season, because I think the season's stakes and pacing were really unlike any TV dramas at the time, and that's because unlike most TV pilots and first seasons, Murphy and Falchuk never planned on continuing the story of the Harmons beyond one season. It was always the goal for the show to reinvent itself should it be renewed. Speaking of those guys, I want to also mention what they've cited as some of the major creative inspirations for this season. Most obviously, this season started the show's reliance on homages to the 1968 film based on the novel by the same name, Rosemary's Baby. We all know the gist of that. A pregnant woman moves into an apartment where exceedingly strange and devilish things begin to occur involving her pregnancy and some intrusive neighbors. Then there's Stanley Kubrick's iconic 1980 adaptation of the Stephen King novel, The Shining, which of course revolves around a writer and his family traveling to a nearly empty hotel during its off-season, where they encounter the supernatural in a film with a masterful use of unreliable narrators. Next up on their mood board was the 1979 film The Amityville Horror, a classic story about a family moving into a haunted house where the previous owner killed his entire family. The film was based on a true crime event, which also could have given them some subtle inspiration to rely on some true crime stories for several plot lines in the many seasons of the show. Lastly, AHS's creators cite the 1973 film Don't Look Now as an inspiration for this season as well, a supernatural thriller that explores clairvoyance and a couple's grief after the death of their young child. Another influence on this season that I haven't seen the creators mention throughout my research yet, but I feel like is all over this season, has got to be M. Night Shyamalan's 1999 film The Sixth Sense, which is about a child psychologist who starts the film being attacked by a patient who then kills himself in front of him, after which that psychologist starts to see a new patient claiming to be psychic. Those of you who know this season can already see some parallels between these films and American Horror Story. But before we jump into the plot, for one, I might spoil those movies for you by acknowledging the show's references to them, but I also want to reiterate the content warning that you saw at the start of the video. This video will deal with more serious topics than I've dealt with in previous videos, things that I know can be extremely triggering to certain people, so please listen to yourselves, your mind, and your bodies, and if this video ever makes you feel uncomfortable, turn it off. I will not be offended. With that said, I'll try to keep things as fun as possible as we venture through part 1 of this season, so now let's pull back the curtain on the pilot episode of AHS. Series co-creators Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk masterfully crafted this pilot episode of American Horror Story, spinning a sinister and twisted web of terrors that lean on familiar tropes of haunted house horror films, while still simultaneously serving as a boundary-pushing blueprint for the series' signature tone, visuals, and performance styles. The first ever title card featuring that iconic Charles Rennie Macintosh typeface places us in 1978 when the eponymous murder house was at its most decrepit, landscaping overgrown and windows boarded up. Naturally, this place attracts mischievous children.
Hey, freak!
These red-headed twins are bullying a young Adelaide Langdon, played just in this scene by actress Caitlin Reed. Young Adelaide delivers the first of many iconic lines from this show.
You are going to die in there.
I must say, I'm surprised none of the twins' lines made such a lasting impression.
We got bats. I hate trees!
The twins, named Troy and Brian, then enter the mansion, and we begin to get familiar with the show's quick cuts and hyper-fluid camera movements as the boys put their bats to the test, destroying any and everything made of glass. Speaking of those cuts, fun fact, this episode was one of a handful of episodes that was actually edited by longtime AHS producer and director Bradley Becker. The twins find a possum with a wound on its neck, but it's still breathing, meaning whatever did that to it is nearby. Venturing down into the basement, they discover several jars of body parts, some from animals and some from humans. Spooked, the twins abort their mischief, but Troy gets separated from Brian before they can make it out of the basement together, and Brian soon finds his brother sliced and diced worse than the possum. As Brian too screams at the unseen beast in the basement, the show cuts to black and places us in the present day, which at the time was around 2011. We meet Vivian Harmon as she is discussing getting back on her birth control with her doctor, who suggests a hormone treatment instead. Vivian Harmon is played by Connie Britton, who has an illustrious career in film and television, but surprisingly, Murder House was the only full season of American Horror Story that she starred in. But like many of her co-stars, she does reprise this character in the 2018 follow-up season and crossover with Coven entitled Apocalypse. But aside from that one extra episode as Vivian, Connie's talents only grace our screens to deliver our first AHS main protagonist. She hasn't exactly shied away from Ryan Murphy though, appearing in the first season of American Crime Story, as well as playing a central role as a dispatcher in the first season of 911. One thing about Connie Britton is she knows how to sign a contract for one season and one season only. Vivian then arrives home in snowy Boston, Massachusetts, where, unlike Connie's character 911, she finds herself on the other end of the line with 911 after she hears someone in her home.
911.
I have an intruder in my house.
Are you sure it's not a member of your family?
No, nobody's home.
What's the address?
Not wasting any time waiting around for the cops, Vivian heads upstairs with her biggest knife, where she finds not an intruder, but her husband Ben in bed with another woman. Ben Harmon is played by Dylan McDermott, who has had 3 different roles in the AHS universe. Vivian descends the hallway in disbelief as Ben chases after her, and when he grabs her, she swings her blade at his arm. Off of that chaos, the pilot episode cuts to the title sequence for the first time ever. Viewers back on October 5th, 2011 perhaps had no clue how many different iterations of this theme song and title sequence would be created throughout the 12 seasons seasons of AHS and the 3 seasons of its episodic spin-off, but one thing's for certain, it creeped people the hell out from day one. The music is jarring and unnerving, composed by Cesar de Villa Irizarry, Charlie Clouser, who composes for the Saw franchise, and the series' primary score composer, Mac Quayle. As for the visuals, they would genuinely give a child and probably a lot of adults nightmares, and they were produced by Kyle Cooper and Prologue Studios. But I don't want to harp too much on this iconic title sequence since I have a whole video breaking down it and the 11 other title sequences of the main series coming soon, and this video is long enough. So definitely make sure you guys are subscribed so you don't miss that. And once we are back from the title sequence, the Harmons have now arrived in their new city, Los Angeles, California. Vivian and Ben's daughter is named Violet Harmon, played by Thaisa Farmiga, in her first major role, the first of many actors whose AHS roles helped catapult their careers to new heights. Aside from her 2 major AHS roles, Thaisa has remained booked and busy in film and TV, perhaps most notably starring in the box office horror hits that were The Nun and The Nun 2. And I could never forget the 4th member of the Harmon family, Hallie, their Chihuahua Poodle mix, or Chipu, I believe. Hallie is played by a dog named Lamb Chop in real life, and yes, I'm being so serious right now. She has showed up in a ton of other projects, according to her bio on GoodDogAnimals.com, including a reunion with Ryan Murphy Productions when she played a dog trapped in a hot car during a season 1 episode of 911. The family's vibe is exactly what you would expect. Vivian and Ben are not on great terms after he cheated, and Violet's the already angsty teen whose life is being upended by her parents. This underlying tension is played off for the most part as the family shares some fake laughs as they head towards their new home, which, surprise surprise, is that same creepy mansion from the opening scene, only now it's cleaned up, renovated, and despite still giving haunted house vibes, it's absolutely stunning. The choice to film at the Rosenheim mansion for the pilot episode and exterior shots throughout the rest of the season was brilliant. Casting the house for this show was just as important as casting any of its characters, and with the amount of times the show has revisited this building itself, 5 times to be exact, you could definitely argue it was the most important casting choice of this season, and maybe even the show. I will delve deeper into the history of the real Rosenheim mansion itself later on in the video, but as you can see from some examples on your screen right now, since the season aired, this house has become an inseparable icon representing American Horror Story itself. The Harmon's realtor, Marcy, is played by Christine Estabrook, who you've definitely seen in some of her several film and television roles, and before Murder House, she previously starred in an episode of Ryan Murphy's earlier FX drama, Nip Tuck, and later she too popped up in a couple episodes of 911. That's now a majority of the actors in this scene that later appeared on 911, if you are keeping track. Ben mentions that Vivian used to be a cellist, but that's a hobby she's recently given up, but conversation quickly turns to some bad news Marcy has to tell the Harmons about the house's previous owners.
They didn't die in here or anything, did they? Yes, actually, both of them.
Violet calms Hallie down after she incessantly barks at the basement door, likely a reference to the dog in Amityville Horror, who was also wary of the basement. Violet asks Marcy more details about the previous owner's death. Marcy says that it was a murder-suicide and it happened in the basement.
We'll take it.
They do take it, in large part thanks to its largely discounted price, and soon enough, the Harmons try their best to settle in. At her new school, Violet cosplays Freddy Krueger while smoking a cig through the courtyard, which angers a gaggle of mean girls.
Leah's grandmother died of lung cancer. She takes this stuff pretty seriously.
This girl named Leah tries to force Violet to eat her lit cigarette, so Violet spits in her face. At home, Vivian begins to peel off layers of wallpaper in one of the rooms, and she starts to reveal a very haunting mural before she's jump scared by adult Adelaide, still giving that same ominous warning.
You're gonna die in here.
Adelaide from this point on is played by actress Jamie Brewer in her debut performance actually, and after this season she went on to appear in Coven, Freak Show, Cult, Apocalypse, as well as the spin-off American Horror Stories, where she briefly reprised the role of Adelaide. Sort of, but that's a story for another day. Behind Adelaide enters her mother, Constance, a large force to be reckoned with, played by the incomparable Jessica Lange. By 2011, Jessica Lange had won several awards, including 2 Oscars, but by the time Ryan Murphy approached her for this new and upcoming horror show, Lange was itching for something new.
I was up at my farm upstate New York and the phone rang. I just loved his energy and his enthusiasm right from the beginning. It didn't take much to talk me into it. He spun this story of the first season of American Horror Story, and I thought, I'm sitting up here at the farm, you know, why not do it? Why not do it? I always wanted to do like a psychological thriller. It didn't end up exactly of that genre, but that's what he originally promised me, so.
Murphy and Lange ended up being a fruitful partnership for both parties, creating award-winning performances in several different projects, and I cannot think of anyone better to play Constance Langdon, or Sister Jude, or Fiona Good, or Elsa Mars. The Langdons are the Harmons' new neighbors, and Constance kicks off the season by being racist towards Dora the Explorer and sending Adelaide back home.
That girl is a monster.
Constance warns Vivian that Adelaide, or Addie for short, has a tendency of finding her way inside this house, whether the current owners like it or not. Herself overstaying her welcome, Constance says she came to California in hopes to be a movie star, but that dream faded once she realized how vulgar the industry had become. On her way out, Constance gives Vivian some sage and asks her name for the first time.
My name is Vivian Harmon.
Anyway.
Later, while saging the house, Vivian checks out the attic for seemingly the first time, where she discovers an elaborate rubber BDSM suit. Ben tosses the suit in the trash, and we immediately cut to the next scene where Ben, a psychologist by profession, is treating a patient named Tate in his new home office. This is, of course, perhaps the most infamous character of all American Horror Story creations, Tate Langdon, played by Evan Peters. But these characters won't know that he's a Langdon for about half of the season. Despite only being 24 at the time of AHS, Peters had been working for quite some time before, but his roles on this show have undoubtedly helped skyrocket his career. Tate tells Ben his recurring fantasy of going to his high school in full skeleton makeup and killing multiple people. Tate then goes on a tangent about ancient civilizations who would participate in blood sacrifices once a month.
Very smart, I like that.
Tate also says his dad left after he caught his mom cheating on him, and he says,
"The world is a filthy place. It's a filthy goddamn horror show."
Elsewhere in the Harmons' haunted household, Violet cuts herself over the sink, but she's interrupted by Tate, who gives her some pointers on her technique. That night, Ben sleepwalks downstairs where he lights the fireplace before being brought back to bed by Vivian. This whole sequence of events is very likely a reference to the Amityville Horror as well. The next day, Vivian is approached on the front lawn by a woman named Moira O'Hara, who says she's been the longtime housekeeper here. Moira is played by Frances Conroy in her first of several iconic AHS roles, but before AHS, Conroy built a name for herself with several acclaimed roles in both film and television, including an episode of Ryan Murphy's Nip Tuck. Vivian is reluctant to accept her as their housekeeper, but Moira makes it clear that she's in over her head taking care of a large house with such specific needs.
Have you ever owned a house this old before? No. It has a personality, feelings. Mistreat it and you'll regret it.
Inside Moira goes, and naturally the ladies discuss some tea over tea as Moira gets into the gory details of the previous owner's murder-suicide.
I cleaned the mess. You'd never know.
Ben walks into the kitchen, and as Vivian introduces Moira, we switch to Ben's perspective, and funnily enough, Moira does not appear to Ben as the soft-spoken older woman that Vivian was talking to. Instead, this Moira is younger, more flirtatious. Young Moira is played by Alexandra Breckenridge in her first of 2 AHS roles, but you may also know her from her roles on The Walking Dead, This Is Us, or Virgin River. Ben is confused that Vivian is on board with hiring Moira, but he doesn't object. In another session with Tate, Ben tries to scope out if Tate's visions of a school shooting pose a tangible threat or not, while also busting him for not taking his antidepressants. Tate says he didn't take them because he just met a girl. Cut to Tate and Violet bonding over self-harm scars, as well as hating California teens and having cheating parents, before he gets kicked out by Ben.
Stay away from him.
After walking in on Moira pleasuring herself, Ben goes into another room and does the same for himself before breaking down into tears. In the kitchen, Vivian is spooked by some classic ghost shit as she enters a perfectly normal kitchen that suddenly has every cabinet opened when she turns her head.
Why are you in my house?
This moment feels strikingly similar to a scene in The Sixth Sense, which itself might have been referencing Poltergeist. Vivian calls Constance over to insist she stop breaking in and messing with her, so Constance tells Adelaide to apologize. But Addie says it wasn't her.
Who did it?
The twins.
Vivian goes a bit ham on Addie, and on her way out, Addie gets bitten by Hallie, the dog.
She shouldn't have done that.
And once Addie's left, Constance says,
"You touch my kid one more time and I will break your goddamn arm."
Later, Violet gets into a fist fight with Leah, one of the girls from earlier. Back at home, Vivian brushes off Ben's affection again, which sends him into a rage.
I screwed up! How many times do I have to say it? I'm sorry!
The details of Ben's affair are now fully clear. After Vivian suffered a very traumatic miscarriage, Ben was sleeping with a 21-year-old student of his in their bed. Ben is absolutely irrational in this scene, honestly, and there's not any point in this season that I feel bad for him.
I needed you, and you got a dog.
He then professes his undying love for Vivian while simultaneously equating his affair to Vivian adopting a dog. Connie Britton nails this scene from her rage, her sarcasm, her playing that switch from being emotionally manipulated to snapping out of it. Unlike McDermott's melodramatic screaming, Britton's emotions feel tangible, and her subtlety really goes a long way in a season that's full of capital C camp. Vivian begins to push Ben away from her until their physical contact turns into passionate kissing that then evolves into their first sexual interaction since the affair. Later, Violet vents about the mean girls to Tate, so he proposes that they scare Leah, and that will get her off of Violet's ass.
How am I gonna terrify her?
Helter-skelter.
That's where I come in.
That night, in her bedroom, Vivian is paid a visit by who we at first presume is Ben wearing the rubber suit. But the show quickly clues us in on what's truly going on as we cut to Ben downstairs in the kitchen, where he once again appears to be sleepwalking and igniting shit. This means whoever is upstairs in that suit is not him. And that brings us to a truly difficult scene to discuss, which I won't be showing visuals from, but essentially the wearer of the rubber suit engages in intercourse with Vivian without ever removing his suit or mask, all the while Vivian believes she's with Ben. Sexual assault is something that often gets mentioned alongside criticism against AHS, and for the most part I've shied away from discussing it too much in my deep dives, but the first season, Murder House, certainly set a precedent for the earlier seasons, especially to opt for shock value, and naturally that does alienate some viewers. This particular scene is not explicitly graphic, but it is extremely disturbing to watch within the context. But according to my own subjective perspective, I would say that this particular scene is handled well. I would caution people who are triggered by scenes of sexual assault to stay far away from this season and perhaps this show as a whole, but the scene isn't glorifying or glamorizing assault here. The scene is intended to be terrifying, and it is indeed a chilling scene to the core. But I'll elaborate some more on my thoughts on the show's history of using sexual assault in its storylines in the review section. Then, putting Tate's plan to action, Violet guides the mean girl Leah down to the basement, where Tate sits in a very infamous t-shirt. The lights begin to flash, and Tate does some good demonic impersonations, but things quickly get terrifying as we see flashes of the monster from the opening scene of this episode. He is known as the Infantata, and he is played by the late Ben Wolfe in his first of 2 AHS roles. The Infantata slashes Leah's face, and when Violet turns on the lights, Tate's sitting in the chair and the Infantata is gone. Leah flees and Violet's freaked out, so she kicks Tate out.
I thought you weren't afraid of anything!
If you thought you've had enough of these men screaming melodramatically, well, we're only just scratching the surface. While on a jog, Ben notices he's being followed by a man who, once he catches up to Ben, we see has scars on his face as well as a fedora, probably another Freddy Krueger homage. So, who is this guy and what's his deal?
I'm Larry Harvey, and you have to get out of that house.
Oh. Larry is played by Dennis O'Hare in his first of several AHS roles, 2 of which we've already talked about in my Roanoke deep dive and my Red Tide deep dive. Larry tells Ben he's out of prison thanks to his terminal cancer diagnosis, but the reason why he was locked up and why he has those scars are actually one and the same. He murdered his wife and 2 kids by lighting them on fire after dousing their rooms in gasoline inside the murder house itself. Much like one of the show's inspiration points, the Amityville Horror, Larry says he was told by the voices in his head to do what he did, and he was not truly in control. Larry says the house is evil, and the Harmons best get the hell out as soon as possible. But Ben's not having any of it, and he demands Larry to stay away from him and his family. In Vivian's bedroom, Constance tries on her jewelry before being confronted by Moira, and it's clear there's a long-standing beef between these 2 women from their first on-screen interactions.
I'd be nervous if I were you too. When things go missing, they always blame the new maid. Don't make me kill you again.
That evening, Vivian gets home from a doctor's appointment, and she informs Ben that she is pregnant. They embrace as we cut to the credits on the pilot episode, but this episode has some cool, quick shots interspersed within the credits, which only occur in this episode, and you might notice that some of those shots are from deleted scenes from the episode. The pilot episode of AHS is honestly astonishing in how it manages to encapsulate nearly everything amazing about the show, as well as why it is so controversial. But first, let's start with the great things about this episode, starting with the visuals. Despite a lot of the style of the show's cinematography coming from Michael Goy, the pilot episode was actually shot by Christopher Baffa, who also shot most of Nip Tuck. The show's fluid camera movements and canted angles can also be found all over Nip Tuck, so you can definitely attribute a good amount of AHS's visual DNA to Christopher Baffa alongside Michael Goy, who took over after the first episode until the end of season 5. Those visuals, in combination with the quick cuts that characterize this episode and the season as a whole, makes the viewer themselves feel just as haunted as the characters themselves. And it won't work for everyone, but I am a fan. Speaking of being haunted, I also think that the episode introduces a lot of really interesting ghost characters that feel both original and complex. Most notably in this episode, the dual appearances of Moira and the mysterious Infantata. Other than the dead, our living characters rely on some familiar tropes of the haunted house variety, but that does make it a bit easier to jump right into their drama and their situation. I think Vivian Harmon is one of the series' strongest protagonists ever. in large part thanks to Connie Britton's portrayal of her as a woman who is just fed up with her asshole husband, now forced into taking control of her life under some seriously extreme circumstances. The episode also introduces one of the series' strongest antagonists ever, Constance Langdon. We will learn so much more about her throughout this season, as she is one of the most complex and intoxicating characters that this show has to offer. Of course, Jessica Lange delivers each line and monologue like her life depends on it, and as you'll see, the character flexes nearly every acting muscle that she has. The two main male characters in this season, Ben and Tate, are both extremely melodramatic, and I think this is intentional, as both are our most unreliable narrators in this season, and they are both characters who are clearly hiding stuff from us. This melodrama does often stand out compared to the more grounded and decisive female characters, and honestly, most of the time Ben or Tate raise their voices, it elicits a laugh from me, whether intentional or not, but this type of campy and emotional performance too is something that appears in nearly every season of AHS, usually through the mini screams of Sarah Paulson. It also cannot be understated just how influential this pilot episode was to the emo teen culture at the time, but that is a stone we will turn over later. But now I do want to touch on some of the more controversial aspects of this episode that definitely have echoes on the series as a whole, particularly how the episode handles self-harm and sexual assault. So again, please, if either of those topics are triggering to you, please click away. I will not be censoring my language, so please proceed with caution. I truly don't want anyone to be triggered. I just want to discuss an often under-discussed on YouTube aspect of this show. And if the video gets demonetized, I'll let you know in the comments below, so you can send me a couple dollars on Patreon for the sacrifice of having this conversation. Firstly, regarding self-harm, there are multiple explicit scenes of Violet cutting herself throughout this season. And the first way that Tate connects with Violet is through encouraging her self-harm, dark joke or not. Of course, adults may look at these scenes differently than impressionable kids or teenagers and not see the show as romanticizing self-harm or encouraging it, as contextually these are clearly two deeply depressed kids without much support for their mental health. That said, actually seeing the self-harm action on screen feels unnecessary to me, but this is a creative choice that FX permitted to air under the TVMA rating, which indicates the content may not be suitable for audiences under 17 years old. But the fact is that this show reached a lot of teens and children, and especially seeing how many teens did heavily romanticize the relationship between Violet and Tate, it's easy to see why this scene started a much smaller version of a very similar conversation sparked by the 2017 Netflix show 13 Reasons Why, which of course dealt with similar themes of teen self-harm. It's easy to just say parents need to safeguard what they want their children to be watching, but at some point, especially today, kids will seek things out on their own because someone at school or on the internet mentioned it. So what I think is even more important than safeguarding and monitoring everything your kid consumes is making sure you are able to communicate with your kids honestly and are able to properly unpack heavy things that they may come across in an honestly dark world. Kids today, I fear, are exposed to much, much worse than the pilot episode of American Horror Story. So I honestly think making sure children who are exposed to things that may give them bad thoughts, they are able to express those thoughts and communicate those thoughts and get support from loved ones or professionals. And I know that is way easier said than done, but god damn it, we really got to talk to the kids and listen to them and their problems. But that is besides the point. I do find the self-harm scenes in this episode to be gratuitous, but I wouldn't opt to have them removed from the show. In general, I do not think that art should be modified to appease a common audience, but I also don't think that makes that art above criticism for how it handles heavy issues or sensitive issues. Now moving on to the theme of sexual assault in this episode, it contains a scene where Vivian is raped by whomever is in the rubber suit. It is left ambiguous in this episode, but it will get answered later on. As I mentioned in the recap, the scene treats the situation as horrific as it truly is, and I personally do not find this scene to be gratuitous in the same way that the self-harm scenes are. It's 100% subjective, but to me the show takes a stylized approach with its close-ups and editing that is more tasteful than other scenes of sexual assault in this season and also in other seasons of the show, most notably Coven and Hotel. In terms of significance to the story, this is a major inciting incident for the season, and I think if you compared it to some of the other instances of the show's storylines involving rape, a lot of those other ones do lean more towards serving more of a purpose of shock rather than story, but what I'm trying to say is this scene in particular does feel like an outlier. As for people who are triggered specifically by this type of stuff, I mean, I'm sure you're not at this point in the video, but if you are, or if you know someone who is, unfortunately, I think my advice is you do have to be hypervigilant about what you personally are consuming and checking what content you're about to watch or read or whatever it may be. There are websites like doesthedogdie.com, that's the one I've used a few times, that list potential triggers for most films and TV shows, but I'll be real with you, I've personally gone to therapy to get over personal triggers that I've had, and it is truly hard to be checking 100% of the things you are watching, especially if you're seeing a brand new movie or hanging out with friends or something like that. So I definitely do see both sides. However, I am pro-informing oneself and anti-censorship, but I want to continue to evaluate how the show handles the topic through these deep dives, because it does escalate from here and results in some scenes later on in the show's history that I would say are definitely gratuitous. But at least for now, the show is focusing on the unnerving reality that neither Vivian nor Ben know that such a violation has occurred. Before we move on to episode 2, I would like to give you a brief history lesson on the location that helped produce this series-spawning season of television. I recently had an impromptu trip to Los Angeles for less than a day, and I happened to be within 15 minutes of the murder house itself. So I thought I might as well pay this iconic piece of AHS history a visit while I was in the area. So let's take a look at some of my footage from my very fast visit so as not to piss off the residents or any of their neighbors. And while we look at that footage, I will give you some of this stunning mansion's vast history. Originally built in 1908 by architect Alfred Rosenheim, the building consists of 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 6 fireplaces, alongside its signature stained glass windows throughout the entire structure. The house was once inhabited by actor Edward Everett Horton in the 30s, and after he left it, it was a convent from the 1930s until around 1994. In 1994, there was a big earthquake that caused the nuns to sell the mansion rather than to repair it, and its ownership history since then is a little fishy, but around 2015, the mansion was bought by a married couple for $3.2 million. It had also been in the market in previous years for as high as $17 million, but this couple bought it in 2015 for around $3.2 million, and this couple later sued the previous owners and the realtors in February of 2018 for not disclosing the fact that many American Horror Story fans regularly visit the house, and some had even broken into the house on numerous occasions.
What do you see on a daily basis?
Just groups of people turning up in cars, taking selfies, taking videos.
Do you recognize the house, Stephen, John? American Horror Story.
We had several break-ins. We had on 3-4 occasions just in the last year. I had to call the police.
The owners say fans have climbed fences and one perched on their ledge. Some teenagers literally got a lift from a garbage truck driver.
He put them in the crane and he elevated it, and I'm in my bathroom and I look out my bathroom window and there's like teenage girls screaming in at me.
And nobody told you at all. This has been an American Horror Story.
We Googled the house, of course, like everybody else would do. And if you Google the house, you find a lot of movies have been filmed here. Lastly, the American Horror Story, which I have never seen, you had never seen.
As far as I can tell, the people from the lawsuit still own the property. I mean, how could you give something like this up if you had the means to upkeep it? Although around 2016, it was briefly listed on Airbnb, and around 2020, the owners ended up embracing the house's notoriety a bit when they hosted a 3-day live stream from inside the Rosenheim mansion. In an article with We Like LA, one of the owners was quoted as saying, "I thought if we could do an event and show them the inside of the house, which is what they want, then maybe there'd be some sort of peace. So people can come in remotely and then we can donate a portion of the proceeds to charity." The livestream apparently consisted of ghost hunts, seances, and lots of talks and demonstrations from spiritual and or supernatural specialists, and a portion of the proceeds were reportedly donated to a local charity helping children in poverty. So hey, I hope the owners are having a better experience with the house than they did around the lawsuit, which I must reiterate was reportedly filed in February of 2018, and it's unclear whatever came of it, but obviously the owners have since allowed the AHS team to return to the mansion to film scenes for Apocalypse that very summer in 2018, as well as again returning in 2021 for the Murder House-centric spin-off episodes. Aside from being famous for its many appearances in the American Horror Story franchise, the Rosenheim Mansion has a reputation for being a popular filming location in general, although I would argue that its history as a filming location is very poorly documented. Most notably, the house does appear in a season 4 episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer entitled Fear Itself, but a ton of articles claim that the mansion has also been featured in a long list of other projects, but they all seem to source back to a property listing from 2012, and I cannot find evidence of most of them, although I've definitely not watched all of these shows from top to bottom, because these are shows like Twilight Zone, Law & Order, that have hundreds and hundreds of episodes, so I cannot be 100% sure, so let me know if you can prove any of these claimed projects to be true outside of Buffy and American Horror Story. It would be really cool, though, if the history of this house could be also tied to such impactful shows, especially of the horror genre, like Twilight Zone, Dexter, The X-Files, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but alas, I can't prove that any of these are a fact aside from Buffy. Back to its use in American Horror Story, though, it's pretty well known at this point that only the pilot episode of AHS filmed inside the actual Rosenheim mansion, and for the rest of the Murder House season, near identical replicas of the house's interiors were recreated on a soundstage. For exteriors, though, the team would return to the Rosenheim mansion several times throughout the production of this season. The second episode of American Horror Story, entitled Home Invasion, starts with a flashback to the murder house's inhabitants circa 1968, nursing students currently getting ready for a night out.
Hey, Maria. You want to come see the doors with us? I can't. I have an anatomy test tomorrow.
Maria and Gladys stay home, though, and a man soon knocks on their door claiming to be injured, so Maria lets him in and tends to his wounds, soon discovering they are fake. The man then takes the girls by surprise when he suddenly knocks out Maria and pushes Gladys to the ground. The following scene depicts yet another disturbing scene of violence against women. The robbers force them to change into these nurses' costumes, and Maria is tied up and murdered. And later on in the episode, it is also confirmed that Gladys was murdered shortly after by being drowned in a bathtub. Notably, the scene reuses the seminal score from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. In the present day, we sit in on another session between Ben and Tate, where he says some truly gross sexual stuff about Violet. And when Tate also brings up Ben's affair with a younger woman, Ben ends their session early before he receives a phone call from that exact younger woman with some breaking news.
I'm pregnant.
Elsewhere, Violet meets up with Leah, the mean girl who had her face slashed by the infantata, and she is not handling it well.
I thought you hated this movie. I've taken it up. I'm terrified of everything.
Violet tries to convince Leah that there was no other creature in the basement with them and it was just Tate wearing a mask, but I don't think she's even fooling herself. Leah asks if she believes in the devil. Violet says she doesn't.
I've looked into his eyes.
The scene ends here, leaving it ambiguous whether Leah was referring to the infantata or perhaps Tate. That night, we see Tate watch Violet sleep until the security alarm starts blaring, and Ben finds their front door to be wide open. Vivian calls the cops while Ben scopes the house, and in the basement, Ben finds Adelaide rolling a red ball into the darkness. Ben kicks Addie out, and as he goes back upstairs, we see the red ball roll back out from the shadows. During this whole scene of very loud chaos, we never really see how Violet or their dog Hallie react to the alarm going off, so I guess they're just very heavy sleepers. The show then surprisingly jumps into Final Destination territory as the next day, one of Ben's patients describes a recurring dream where they're trapped in an elevator, and, well...
I'm feeling around like, what the hell? Where's my legs, man?
The patient then asks Ben what it's like living in the quote-unquote murder house, which is the first time these words are uttered in the show. As Ben is only aware of the previous owner's incident, he is shocked to learn of the house's nickname and reputation for being a hotspot for true crime fanatics because of its long and gruesome history. After the session, Ben calls Constance to tell her he will no longer be treating Tate because he crossed a line getting involved with Violet. Meanwhile, he also finds that previous patient wandering around the house, clearly fascinated with its history herself. Next door at the Langdon household, Addie is helping Constance make cupcakes poisoned with a vomit inducer intended for Violet. Addie asks why she can't be like the girls in the magazines, and Constance comforts her at first before quickly losing patience with her questions.
You were hatched with other gifts.
Like what?
Oh, Christ on a stick. I don't know. Finger painting.
Based on some advice from his stalker Larry, Ben lies to Vivian and tells her one of his old patients is in desperate need of his service back in Boston. That way he can go there for a couple of days and sort out the drama brewing up with the other woman he just got pregante. I'm sure this is all going to turn out just fine. Constance later delivers her poisoned cupcakes and makes it clear that
They're not for you. At your age, you might as well just crazy glue a stick of butter to your ass. These are for Violet.
Constance then tells Vivian she can tell that she is pregnant.
I could smell that little angel the second I walked in the door. Pheromones.
Wow. Constance wants to deliver these cupcakes directly to Violet, so when she realizes Violet's not home, she heads out, but Vivian stops her to ask if she can smell anything else about the baby.
2 sugars and a great deal of half and half.
Vivian cuts into one of the cupcakes, and despite Constance's repeated insistence that they're for Violet, Vivian does not give a fuck. Constance tells Vivian that she has 4 kids.
My womb is cursed.
She explains that she and her husband were so beautiful, she believes it pissed off the gods, and that is why each of her children have maladies, as she puts it.
Except for one. He was my gift, but I lost him to other things. Your baby's fine. Enough sad talk.
We then get another taste of the beef between Constance and Moira.
Moira and I go way back. I hope her dusting has improved.
Your sense of humor was and continues to be a delight.
Is everybody crazy?
Ben then departs for Boston under those false pretenses, and Vivian checks in on Violet, who too says she can tell Viv is pregnant.
You want to talk about it?
No, thanks. I'm good.
Vivian leaves and Violet rejects the poisoned cupcake, and in Boston we meet Hayden, the young woman Ben had an affair with. She is played by Kate Mara, who you definitely know from her several many film and TV appearances, and before AHS she previously had a recurring role on Nip Tuck. We then catch back up with Hallie the dog as she and Vivian are having a movie night that soon is interrupted by the doorbell. At the door is a woman who repeats the same thing the man who killed the nurses said from the episode's opening scene set in 1968.
I don't want to bother you, but I'm hurt, needing some help.
What happened to you?
Vivian locks the door, but it's soon clear that someone else is already inside the house. What happens next at first seems very inspired by the 2008 horror film The Strangers, as these 3 masked home invaders then gather Vivian and Violet into the same room, but they then unmask and make it clear that they're here to recreate the crimes of R. Franklin, the killer from that opening scene. One of the intruders, by the way, is Ben's patient from before who was wandering the halls and had a recurring nightmare of being split in 2 by an elevator. Violet and Vivian fight back though, and Tate shows up and tells Violet that she needs to get the intruders to the basement. Ben's patient with the fear of being cut in half by an elevator eats Violet's abandoned cupcake, which works almost immediately.
Jesus, I'm gonna shit myself.
Not in the staging area.
Next door, Addie interrupts Constance's business meeting.
I told you I was in a business meeting.
To tell her about the invaders at the house next door, but she misunderstands her and locks her in what she calls the bad girl closet. It's a closet full of mirrors where Constance instructs Addie to
Look at yourself. Look long and hard.
Sick off the cupcake, Ben's patient wanders the halls looking for her accomplices, but she instead finds Tate, who takes an axe to her stomach. Vivian overpowers the guy who was watching her and beats him repeatedly, while Violet lures the other intruder to the basement, where Tate introduces her to the ghost of Gladys. With Tate and Gladys entertaining her in the basement, it's the perfect opportunity for the Harmon ladies to book it. Back in Boston, Ben waits for Hayden in the waiting room of an abortion clinic, but he leaves when he sees he has 13 missed calls following the home invasion. In the next scene, Ben is back in LA and he's lying to cops about his imaginary patient back in Boston. The cops then inform Ben about the woman he saw earlier in the week who took part in the home invasion. The cops say they think the intruders were a part of a cult replicating famous Los Angeles murders.
Looks like maybe she couldn't go through with it. Ran off. Her friends went after her. Tried to do a Black Dahlia on her.
The cops leave. Violet basically says she respects her mom now that she's fought off some killers, and she thinks her dad's a big old piece of shit. And Vivian says,
"We're selling this house."
With the entire plot of the season in mind, this episode does feel a little bit inconsequential, and the home invasion itself is easy to forget in the grand scheme of all that goes down within these walls. That said, with the copycat aspect of those attempted killers, it is a very creative way to temporarily heighten the stakes while also expanding the lore, as the audience and the Harmons alike are still trying to figure out who we can trust. It's also a very well written and well shot and performed episode that is crucial to understanding the mother-daughter dynamics of both Vivian and Violet, and Constance and Adelaide. Speaking of the latter, their scene in this episode is deeply disturbing to watch. Yet because of Lang's ability to play Constance's many different levels, from sweet and soft-spoken to cold and dry, then jumping all the way to outright evil, you really cannot look away, no matter how atrocious Constance is. As for Jamie Brewer, it is honestly mind-blowing that AHS is her first acting gig, and she can act opposite such a legendary actress in some of the most intense scenes ever put on television. Truly hats off to the both of them for making their dynamic as unnerving and heart-shattering as it is. Episode 3 is the first episode written by Jennifer Salt, who lent her pen to about 2 episodes per season throughout the show's first 5 seasons, and it's also the first episode to be directed by Bradley Becker, one of the show's executive producers and frequent directors. Entitled Murder House, the episode delves even further into the history of this macabre mansion, starting with a flashback to 1983 when Constance Langdon herself lived there with her husband Hugo. This opening scene is another that involves sexual violence, as it explicitly shows Hugo forcing Moira into sex. Constance walks in on this and shoots the young Moira O'Hara in the eye, killing her before turning the gun on Hugo, shooting him thrice in the chest. As Constance breaks down in the master bedroom, the show does a nice transition to the present day as Vivian enters that very room, but instead of finding a young Constance there, it's Ben. Our modern-day couple are arguing over finances, as Ben has just revealed to her that they don't have the funds to move out of the house at that exact moment, and they'll need to sell the house first. The classic haunted house movie excuse. They then demonstrate a perfect example of the gaslighting spouse trope that so many seasons have since pretty much copy and pasted from this season.
Honey, you're having PTSD. We just need to find you a therapist that our insurance will cover right away.
Don't make me feel like I'm crazy.
Viv has other plans, as she's gonna get an estimate on how much renovations would cost on the house so that they can start getting it into better shape for a quick sale.
If you lie to me again, we're through.
After the title sequence, Vivian has Marcy, the realtor, over and insists that she help her and Ben get back the money they put into the house.
You owe our family. Under the law, you are obligated to disclose any material facts that might have influenced our decision to buy this house.
Sounds awfully familiar, right? Constance steals more things from the Harmons and insults Moira for good measure before insinuating that she stole Constance's husband.
I don't want to be here anymore! I'm frightened! I miss my mother!
Every time I find my heart breaking just a sliver for you, I suddenly remember. You made this mess for yourself. And I also remember every time I see that ghostly eye, that I was and continue to be a hell of a shot.
Within these first handful of episodes, Constance is proving herself to be one of the cruelest villains on TV, from her abuse of Adelaide to the psychological warfare she unleashes onto Moira, who, despite how she may sometimes appear, was only a young woman when she was murdered by Constance directly after being violently raped by Hugo. Moira now is forced to inhabit the boundaries of the site of both of these crimes, where she is unable to escape the torment of her killer. In the next scene, we meet another one of Ben Harmon's patients, and surprise, she's played by none other than Adina Porter, who of course went on to play some huge roles in later AHS seasons, including Dinah Stevens, Beverly Hope, and Lee Harris. A lot of newer or forgetful AHS fans might be surprised to see Adina in such an early season, but in your defense, in this season she plays Sally, a character that is easy to forget because that's kind of the point of her whole character. Sally is going through a divorce, but her monotone delivery of her qualms caused Ben to doze off during their session.
I'm so upset, and I wonder if I'll ever be able to love or be loved again.
And soon enough, Ben wakes up in the backyard with his hands covered in blood. Back inside, he finds Moira cleaning up a pool of blood on the floor. Adding to Ben's confusion, his tape recorder has gone missing, and while he's looking for it, Moira's sexual harassment of Ben goes further than ever before, which causes Ben to grab Moira and scream at her. Vivian walks in at just that moment, then the three of them have a discussion that amplifies the irony of Moira's two distinctly different appearances depending on which gender is looking at her. But Vivian says that it might just be best if Moira finds work elsewhere.
Just toss me out like a piece of trash, will you? No, you won't. Not this time. I deserve respect.
Moira threatens to press charges if Ben touches her again, or if either of them try to wrongfully terminate her. So with that settled, Moira heads out for her lunch break. But later, she continues her sexual harassment before informing Ben that he has a guest in his office, none other than Hayden. Hayden tells Ben that she has decided to keep the baby, she's moving to LA, and she plans on being financially supported by Ben, and it's not really up for discussion.
I matter!
A detective then shows up and asks Ben about Sally, Adina Porter's character, who is now a missing person. AHS then does something that it will soon become known for. It dramatizes a true crime in American history. In this scene, it's the murder of actor Sal Mineo, who starred opposite James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. In real life, at least on official records, Mineo was stabbed by a mugger in a quote-unquote random robbery. However, because of the fact that this case remained cold for about 5 years and a ton of flimsy evidence, there was a lot of speculation at the time that there might have been personal or even homophobic motives behind his murder, as Mineo was open about his bisexuality and his attackers did not steal money from his wallet. Witnesses that night also saw a white man fleeing the scene, a description that does not match the man who ended up being convicted for the crime 5 years after the fact, Lionel Ray Williams, who was sentenced to 51 years of the crime. The case against Williams, though, includes several witnesses claiming Williams himself told them he killed the actor, as well as him being being linked to a nearby robbery on the same night. Although the investigation into that robbery seemingly relied on a lot of police lineups, which I believe to be an extremely flawed practice. Williams was released on parole in 1990, but maintains his innocence regarding Mineo's death. Frankly, the resources about this case are pretty limited, but I wanted to present both sides as best as I could so you know a bit of the context of this scene that admittedly isn't super integral to this episode. So the show's depiction of Sal Mineo's death intentionally corroborates Lionel Ray Williams' innocence, as it depicts Mineo cruising in an alleyway when he comes across the wrong guy, a white man who declares before killing the famed actor. As we soon see, this is all a part of a bus tour of famous Los Angeles murder sites, one that Vivian noticed has a stop at her house earlier in this episode, so now she's sitting in on the tour to hear all of the gory details about her new home. The tour guide acknowledges the Williams case while emphasizing that LA locals believe Lionel Ray Williams is innocent, and Mineo's death was a hate crime. I don't mind this first instance of AHS covering true crime, since it presents a commonly believed alternative narrative to the official report of Sal Mineo's death, which I do believe to be entirely based on no direct evidence. Later instances of the show doing similar true crime references, though, I would argue are less well-intentioned. But this Eternal Darkness tour quickly moves on to the next stop, which is our all too familiar murder house. Instead of hearing this guy tell us the house's history, the show jumps to a flashback set in the 1920s where we meet the couple who constructed the mansion, Charles and Nora Montgomery. Charles is played by actor Matt Ross, and Nora is, of course, played by another AHS legend, Lily Rabe, who has gone on to appear in 9 out of the series' 12 seasons, and she truly has a huge impact in each of her roles, no matter how big. The show depicts Charles as a mad scientist addicted to his own drugs with a knack for making Frankenstein-esque experiments. The one he's working on when we're first introduced to him appears to be a two-headed pig with wings, which is an absolutely horrifying sight. Nora appears to be fed up with Charles and his batshit experiments, and when she calls him up for dinner, he is sent into a fit. At the dinner table, we meet their baby, named Thaddeus Montgomery, who is currently caught in the middle of his parents' highly dramatic argument. Nora's not just upset with Charles' freakish projects, she's also upset that she's been having to deal with bill collectors all week long, and Charles is not making any money. So Nora arranges for Charles to treat a friend of hers who is willing to pay $60 for an under-the-table abortion. Soon enough, Dorothy Hudson shows up at their front door, while Nora makes sure she gets the cash first before giving her some sort of anesthetic and rushing Dorothy down to the basement. Dorothy Hudson was the first of many of Charles Montgomery's long list of patients, and she was played by actress Abby Cobb, who I actually had a chance to talk to recently while we were both guests on the AHS-themed episode of the horror podcast Half Hour of Horror with hosts Aaron McLean and my pal Chase. So here's just some of what she had to say about her experiences working on this short but integral scene to the season's history.
I was actually, they switched around the episodes once they decided to edit and air them. So when I filmed it, it was the first thing they filmed after the pilot, and they had no idea how big it was going to be. The pilot used the real house and the real exteriors, and my day of filming, I guess, was the very first time they were on a soundstage with the replicated house.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they built the whole thing again at, I think it was Sony, the Sony lot, or no, 20th Century Fox lots. From episode 102, Murder House, back when no one knew. I have a copy of the script.
Back when it was 102.
I have my stockings from 1917. They made me try on, all the clothes were real from like I tried on a dress from pre-Titanic for that show. This is a wardrobe that says, please use the garter belt to hold up your stockings and put the garter over the money to hold the money. Thank you. So I had fake money. I guess I had to tie the garter. I was supposed to pay for the abortion and they murder me. I think that's what happens. I don't know. It was just lots of crying.
Abby has worked on so many cool shows and films, including Them, which I still need to get around to watching, and another show within the vast Ryan Murphy universe that we've talked about already a lot in this video, 911, which she also shared some really cool stories from in that podcast, so definitely check it out in the description box below if you guys want to hear more from Abby, as well as mine and the host's unscripted thoughts on each and every AHS season. But back to the plot. While hearing some of this history on the tour bus, Vivian believes her period has started, which is typically not supposed to occur while pregnant. So she panics, leaves the bus, and runs into the house. Cut to the following doctor's appointment, where Vivian says that the bleeding stopped the moment she entered the house, and the doc ensures her that a little bleeding can occur and everything on the inside looks normal. Vivian mentions that they're planning on moving out of the house, but the doctor warns her,
"No moving while you're pregnant. Death, divorce, moving. These are the three most stressful events of..."
And by the way, this doctor's name is Dr. Hall, which is just one letter away from Dr. Hill, the doctor from Rosemary's Baby, which is a clear influence on this season, especially the pregnancy storyline. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was a subtle nod to that film. 12 seasons later, the show would again reference this doctor in another Rosemary's Baby inspired season, Delicate, which features a Dr. Hill as well. During the appointment, Ben experiences flashbacks of Hayden before fainting. Ben is later approached by Larry, and Ben threatens him once again to stay away.
"Oh, I understand."
And at home, Ben goes on a fervent search for his missing tape recorder before waking up in the backyard again. Inside, Vivian answers the doorbell to none other than the ghost of Nora Montgomery, who then gives Vivian a tour of her house. But when they get to the kitchen, Nora is horrified by the renovations that have been made. Nora brings up her son before doing some classic ghost shit.
I had a child once.
Aside from Nora vanishing, the reveal of the fatal injury on her backside feels like a potential nod to The Sixth Sense. While mindlessly digging the hole he started digging earlier, Ben is approached by the detective who informs him that they found Sally Freeman, and she had Ben's tape recorder.
Sally was admitted to University Hospital 2 days ago. Failed suicide attempt. Found in a hotel downtown.
The detective then plays the audio of Ben's session with Sally, which consists of Sally screaming that she's in pain to a completely silent Ben before taking a letter opener from his desk to herself, which explains the pools of blood from after Ben blacked out. You might have also noticed the detective mentioning that Sally was found in a hotel in downtown Los Angeles, and there's nothing disproving it if you wanted to imagine that hotel is none other than the Hotel Cortez from Hotel, although there are obviously many hotels in downtown LA. But I wouldn't be super shocked if Ryan and Brad had a haunted hotel season on their minds as early as season 1, especially since their research on Los Angeles true crime stories had to have overlapped with some of the major real-world inspirations for AHS Hotel, including LA's own Cecil Hotel. Ben gets a call from Dr. Hall, who did a blood test on him after he fainted, and she says she found an opiate that was banned in the 30s in his blood, suggesting Moira could be drugging him. But the call is interrupted by Hayden at the door, who comes in guns blazing, ready to reveal all to Vivian.
I'm pregnant! This is Harmon!
Ben informs her that Viv isn't home, and the two agree to discuss the matter over lunch. However, on the way out,
You know what I'd love? A big, thick, juicy...
She gets knocked out by Larry with a shovel, who then kills her by repeating that action a few more times for good measure. Ben then attacks Larry before going to hold Hayden.
What are you doing? You taking a DNA bath? You're a murderer! You're a murderer!
Yeah.
Larry says he's just done Ben a huge favor. Now he doesn't have to worry about breaking Hayden's pregnancy to Vivian, and he doesn't have any blood on his hands. As for Larry, well, he's out of prison because of his terminal cancer diagnosis, so I guess he's just living every day like a GTA online server, no consequences.
You got a nice good hole started here. See? We're halfway there.
Larry then reminds Ben that he'll leave him alone at the small cost of $1,000. But Ben gets sick inside while Larry makes some serious progress on the hole. Eventually, Larry comes across some long buried human remains And as Moira cries from inside, we see her maid's uniform, indicating this is where Constance buried her after her murder. Larry adds Hayden's body to the pit, and we fast forward to the construction of a gazebo over the gravesite, an idea that was planted to Ben by Constance earlier in the episode, as a way to thwart Moira's escape plan that has been going on under our noses this whole time. Constance confirms this by telling Moira,
"Now you're stuck here forever."
This episode is a classic one in my giving us a lot of backstory while still accelerating the plot enough that by the end of it, it's nearly impossible to not want to watch the next episode. It does feature another sexual assault scene in the flashback when Hugo rapes Moira, and compared to the scene in episode 1, this one is much more explicit and violent and triggering, for lack of a better term. That feeling is amplified by Moira being immediately killed by Constance afterwards, and throughout the episode, while Constance haunts Moira's afterlife, she refuses to acknowledge that what Hugo did to her was rape. The show isn't saying Constance is right. It's very clear that Moira was raped, murdered, and is now being tormented for eternity, all of which are heinous acts committed to a young woman by her employers. That is all very clearly communicated in the show, but that does not make you feel any less gross watching it unfold. In combination with Constance's inhumane treatment of her daughter Adelaide, especially in these first few episodes, Constance is being presented as a deeply spiteful person with truly dark capabilities. In my review section for episode 1 in this video, I was talking about how the assault scene in the pilot is handled relatively more tastefully than a lot of the other similar scenes in the show, and it also holds a lot of plot significance. While this scene I would say is less tasteful, it still holds a good amount of plot significance. Whether it was necessary for the story or not, that's up for you to decide. But I want to bring up a separate scene from a different season that feels like the complete opposite of both instances that have occurred in season 1 so far, and that would be what is, off of the top of my head, the most gratuitous and unnecessary scene of sexual assault in the history of the show, which I believe occurs in season 5, episode 1, largely because it serves next to no purpose in the plot, and in my opinion, it was not handled with care, especially based on how Ryan Murphy and actor Max Greenfeld, who participated in the scene, spoke about said scene in an interview. Of course, this scene in episode 3 is definitely an escalation of the assault scene in episode 1, but not yet has the show desensitized itself so much that it stops paying attention to how its victims are being treated and portrayed. While we're still speaking on Moira, I think her story reveal in this episode was the strongest aspect of this particular episode. At first, you think that the 1986 flashback might be suggesting that Moira's present-day sexual harassment of Ben may just be some form of an unhealthy cycle of her trauma, but in the end, she was actually using him as a means to extract her remains from the grounds, which would then free her soul from being trapped in the murder house, where in her case, the living haunt the dead. And most of what I just said is told to us in this episode without any dialogue, which I absolutely love because it shows the show is putting a lot of trust in its audience, and that's something that AHS and a lot of shows these days do not do anymore. Aside from obviously strong performances from Conroy and Lang, Lily Rabe also gets to do the most as Nora Montgomery in this episode, and it is also great. Episode 4 kicks off a 2-part Halloween episode, and it is the first AHS episode to be written by producer James Wong, who you may also know for writing and directing Final Destination 1 and 3, not to be confused with James Wan, another prominent horror storyteller. The episode starts with yet another flashback, but this time it's just a year before the Harmons made their move to LA, when the ill-fated gay couple was living in the murder house. Their names are Chad and Patrick, and their relationship is troubled to say the least, with Patrick boldly admitting to cheating after being confronted by Chad. These two are played by some frequent Ryan Murphy collaborators. Patrick is played by Teddy Sears, and Chad is played by Zachary Quinto. Oddly enough, this former on-screen couple reunited recently as stars of the 2024 NBC medical procedural Brilliant Minds. Patrick and Chad lament about the decay of their relationship and their inability to call it off due to both of their financial futures being tied to this house, which they are unable to sell due to the state of the housing market circa 2010. And probably that Eternal Darkness tour isn't helping either. Later, Chad is visited by the Rubber Man, and he too assumes his spouse is behind the getup until he starts to attack before snapping Chad's neck in the apple bobbing bucket. By the time Patrick walks in on this, it is too late. This means their death was no murder-suicide as it was ruled, but they were actually murdered by this mysterious Rubber Man who is also haunting the Harmons. In the present day, Marcy proposes the Harmons hire professional decorators to zhuzh up the place and also give the exterior a spooky seasonal flair, since Halloween is right around the corner. Next door, Constance's boyfriend Travis reads a book to Adelaide about the Celtic roots of Halloween, which include the notion that on October 31st, the veil between the living and the dead is lifted and ghosts are able to walk amongst the living.
No way I ever want to be a ghost. It's so sad.
Constance scolds Addie for flirting with Travis, and she forces her to tell her what she whispered to him. So Addie admits that she wishes to dress like a pretty girl for Halloween.
You can go as Snoopy again. The costume will still fit if you lay off those chocolate chips.
Before Constance departs, Addie tells her,
The dead can walk freely on Halloween.
We've always known that.
Larry rings the doorbell to take his blackmail up a notch, threatening to report Ben's gazebo gravesite to the city.
Give me my treat. You don't want the trick.
But Ben is still not budging. Later, Ben sees Tate.
I don't want to be like this. I want to be a good person.
Ben says he'll meet with Tate again, but it can't be at his house, so they will meet later for coffee. Vivian gets a security system installed, and she's also hired a security guard named Luke, who will appear briefly a few times throughout the season, but his role is pretty small considering he's a fairly well-known actor, Morris Chestnut from Boys in the Hood and several other film and television shows. Out front, Vivian meets the ghosts of Chad and Patrick, who, off of Viv's suggestion that they're Marcy's decorators, take on the job. As our two toxic couples carve pumpkins together, the Harmons get a little taste of Chad and Patrick's petty bickering.
I love Halloween. So does Patrick, because the bars are just awash in twinks with six-packs and revealing outfits. Isn't that right, Pat?
Have another drink, dear. Crafting brings out his inner George and Martha.
The gays then suggest that they tear down the new gazebo, which makes Ben a bit uneasy, causing him to accidentally slice his finger. So Patrick and Ben go upstairs to retrieve a first aid kit, where Patrick then gropes Ben out of nowhere, but Ben refuses these non-consensual advances. Downstairs, Chad and Vivian discuss their cheating spouses, and Chad tells Viv that you always gotta check the phone bill. In her bedroom, Violet is jump scared by Addie hiding under the bed.
Trick or treat! Smell my feet! Give me something good to eat! Addie! I want to be a pretty girl for Halloween!
Addie asks, or demands rather, that Violet give her a makeover so her dream costume of being a pretty girl can come true this Halloween. Luckily, Violet's down, and the girls get to know each other during the process of the makeover. Addie prods about Violet's feelings for Tate, while still not revealing that they're siblings, because of course the Harmons still don't know that Tate is a Langdon. Besides, of course, Ben. Violet also lets Addie know for the 100th time that they'd prefer if she stopped breaking and entering.
But I like it here. My friends are here. Wow. Violet! Beautiful!
Addie's joy in response to her makeup is sadly short-lived, as Constance is completely set off by it when she returns home.
Wash that smut off your face!
No! want to be a pretty girl.
Well, you're not a pretty girl, and you know it.
After some more extreme emotional abuse, Adelaide runs to her room. Then, in a scene that's highly disturbing but in a less overt way, Violet goes down to the basement where she is attacked by the rubber man, who covers her mouth and pushes her backward before he begins to laugh and remove his mask. It's Tate who then instantly makes out with her. Violet insists she wasn't scared by Tate's prank, and Tate takes this as a challenge. So he and Violet use a spirit board while expanding some of Charles Montgomery's gruesome story through flashbacks. After the Montgomerys' secret abortion service went on for a while, one of the patients told her boyfriend what she had done, and this man particularly wanted revenge. What happens next is clearly inspired by the true crime story of the Lindbergh kidnapping and murder circa 1932, as in the show, little baby Thaddeus Montgomery has been stolen from his crib through an open window. Flashbacks then show us the fate of Thaddeus as detectives bring evidence boxes that contain body parts in separate jars. I'm sorry if you expected things to get more pleasant as the season goes on, because that is definitely not the case. Of course, Charles then got to work turning his own son into a Frankenstein-esque experiment, horrifying Nora.
What he created was ungodly and monstrous.
As Tate concludes his ghost story, he tells Violet that what remains of Thaddeus still lives in the house to this day. And just to connect those final dots, if you haven't yourself, Charles turned Thaddeus into what we now call the Infantata.
Oh my god. You are so full of shit.
Violet then says she's annoyed that they always hang out in the basement and she wants to go out on a date. So Tate jumps at the opportunity to take Violet out on a date tomorrow on Halloween, which begins in the very next scene as Tate and Ben meet up in a public park for their recently agreed upon session. During this, Ben cries as he tells Tate he sees himself in him.
Hey. It's gonna be okay, Dr. Harmons. Sorry.
We then catch up with the Langdons, brace yourselves, as Addie has decided overnight that she's too old for trick-or-treating and she won't be going out in costume this year. But Constance has her own fucked up way of compromising with her daughter, as she's purchased her an unsettling mask which she says will help her be a quote-unquote pretty girl. One thing this season absolutely nails is making you feel sick to your stomach, especially in any scene involving Constance or Tate Langdon. And Jessica Lange especially is able to deliver some of the most inhumane lines in a way that cuts the audience to the core, yet still seems genuine to this layered character. Next door, Ben gets dressed up as Dracula, inspired by a flashback he had to Violet dressing up as Dracula as a kid.
Have you seen my fangs? Ah. Fangs are
Vivian took the gay ghost's advice and checked the phone records, and Hayden's number is obviously all over it. Despite Viv's prior ultimatum that if Ben continues to lie to her, they're through, Ben continues to lie to her about the phone records and seeing Hayden while he was in Boston. He claims he threatened her with legal action if she continued to harass him, and that since then Hayden hasn't contacted him.
But believe me, Hayden is over.
It's Hayden.
Downstairs, gay ghost Chad puts the finishing touches on transforming the mansion into an elaborate haunted house, while also making the Harmons' mood even worse by trashing their looks.
What's the matter?
He doesn't like our costumes.
In a reference to Chad being particular about the type of apples they used in the episode's opener, he begins to get pissed about the presence of gala apples in his bucket. When he realizes Ben bought them, he begins to lay into him like he's a hostess who bumped his reservation.
I think you're overreacting.
Because I'm the only one who actually gives a shit? I think you should just leave.
You think we should just leave our house?
It's not your house.
Get out!
Yeah, leave. We are not leaving this house.
Get out! Get out! Get out!
Soon after, Vivian makes Ben leave the house as well, saying she does not believe him.
And I don't want to live with suspicion anymore. So I want you to go. I want you to go.
However, just at that moment, Vivian begins to shout in pain, saying the baby is kicking, which does not happen this early in a pregnancy. As he takes Vivian to the hospital, he tells Violet not to answer the door for anyone, but Adelaide soon wants to show Violet her costume, so she waits at the front door as Violet ignores her, where she is soon bullied by some local girls. Wanting to be a part of their group, Adelaide chases after them, but the mask's low visibility causes tragedy to strike as an oncoming car barrels right over her, not ever stopping. Eventually, Constance is drawn to the commotion when the paramedics arrive and announce that Adelaide is dying. Lang delivers a truly heartbreaking performance of grief, perhaps guilt, and most definitely desperation as Constance tries to carry a dying Addie to the grounds of the murder house so that she can forever roam its halls.
If you can't help me, then get out of the goddamn way!
Just let us...
But it is too late. Where Adelaide's spirit goes from here is a mystery, but I like to think it was better than a life in the murder house with her horribly abusive mother and all the other monsters that frequent its halls. At the hospital with Vivian, there's this random joke with two other emergency room patients that I think is a very unexpected moment of levity in this disturbing episode.
No, not his face. That's fake. He broke his leg.
Again, Vivian says her symptoms stopped as soon as she left home, and the nurse does some good old-fashioned medical gaslighting.
Well, I'm sure it's not kicks that you're feeling. The baby's only the size of a kidney bean at 8 weeks.
I know, that's why I'm concerned. I feel like there's something wrong.
Well, I'm sure it's just gas. So.
However, during the ultrasound, the nurse faints at what she sees. Since the dead can travel freely on Halloween night, we then see Moira visit her mother at a care home where she is on life support. Moira apologizes to her mother for not being there for her during the rest of her life before she disconnects her mother's access to oxygen, which eventually stops her heartbeat. Her mother's spirit then appears behind her and invites her to come with her.
I want to, but I can't, Mother. I can't.
And in a heartbreaking change of shots, Moira's mother is gone. Back at the murder house, Larry has gone completely unhinged, and he's now demanding his $1,000, so Violet calls Ben, who makes sure Violet stays locked inside. But by the time the Harmons get home from the hospital, though, their house alarm is blaring, and Violet is gone. But there's a knock at the door. Much like episode 2, episode 4 puts a slight pause on the major conflicts and characters of the season, in this case to focus on the very complicated relationship between Adelaide and Constance, and taking that relationship, of course, to dramatic heights. The episode also gives us an entertaining backstory on another one of the house's previous owners, as Chad and Patrick have finally showed up for the haunt. Chad and Patrick are stereotypical rich LA gays, but their presence in this episode brings a lot of levity, especially when they mistakenly take on the role as the Harmons Halloween decorators, and levity is much needed in an episode that also brings Adelaide's storyline to a shocking end in what is a defining moment of the show. For first-time viewers, Addie's early exit was a complete shock, and going forward it puts a lot of emotional weight on the season, driving much of Constance's motives. Aside from being a tearjerker, the episode is also scary, as you might expect from a Halloween episode of a horror show. And as for the disturbing mystery of who inhabited the rubber suit, specifically in the pilot episode, while that is still ongoing, this episode does seem to point a finger in Tate's direction, which just adds about 15 new levels of disturbing to the whole thing. But at this point in the season, they still want to keep us guessing, and they don't want us to know all the answers quite yet. The second half of the Halloween episode begins by filling us in on what happened between the time Violet called her parents and when they got home. She goes to her room where Tate happens to be throwing stones at her window. He tells her to go down to the basement where he gives her a rose. They then go out on their date on the beach. Outside, Ben attacks Larry and accuses him of setting this all up as an elaborate hoax since Hayden can't truly be dead since she was just at his front door.
Oh, that's bullshit! I want some goddamn answers!
He'll kill Larry if he steps foot on the property again. Tate and Violet make out on the beach, and Violet says she wants to take this further, but Tate says they can't, and he blames it on his antidepressants. Tate then tells her that this beach used to be his hideaway when he felt misunderstood by the world. But eventually they are approached by a group of gory teens. The teens then begin to berate Tate.
Good job, Tate. You finally came out of hiding. We've been waiting for you.
Tate claims he doesn't know these guys, and they let him and Violet walk away for now. Meanwhile, Vivian has a heated phone call with the ghost of Hayden, who insists that she ask Ben about what he was really up to in Boston, written in the fog of the mirror. Convinced Hayden's broken into the house, Vivian says they've got to call the cops, but Ben says he'll handle it himself, and in the basement, Ben and Ghost Hayden have a long, drawn-out screaming match before Larry sneaks up behind Ben and knocks him out.
I really owe you an apology.
In the front yard, Ghost Chad destroys the decorations he and the Harmons worked on together.
I'm sorry, Vivian. I really am. But you ruined my Halloween, and now you have to pay.
He threatens Vivian, but she soon gets inside just in time, where Hallie leads her to the bathroom, where Hayden has lit a fire with the help of chronic arsonist Larry Harvey. Violet asks Tate about the kids at the beach, but Tate continues to insist he didn't know them. Then, as if this house wasn't crowded enough, those very teens arrive on the lawn. Then the show does everything in its power to convince us poor innocent Hallie has been blown up in the microwave a la Mr. Guinea, but I will not put you all through that suspense because Hallie does indeed survive Halloween night. Violet goes outside to reason with the teens, but they all trauma dump on her about the losses of their futures. Violet's obviously confused, so the teens then give her a bunch of clues regarding the mystery of their connection to Tate, before Tate leads them away from Violet by just bolting down the street. And realize Hallie's alright, thank God. Hayden again tells Viv that she has to know what went down in Boston.
I have to talk about Boston, about the pregnancy, about everything.
I told you I'm pregnant.
What? You're pregnant?
Hayden then breaks a picture frame and begins to threateningly walk towards Vivian. Meanwhile, downstairs, Larry douses the house in gasoline until he is stopped by Chad. And in the basement, Ben is awoken by Nora Montgomery, who tells him he urgently needs to save his baby.
I will not permit another failure in this house.
Thanks to a panic button, the Harmons security team is alerted and the whole situation is diffused. Then we see a slight flashback to Constance visiting Adelaide at the morgue, where she finally sees her daughter's beauty.
Look at you, I'm pretty good.
But as he breaks down, he begins to have flashbacks to his recurring dreams he was telling Ben about, and finally revealing to the audience that they were not fantasy after all. As the sun begins to rise, the murder house ghosts who went out for the holiday begin to return home. Moira, the twins, the gays, and the nurses. Kicked out for real by Vivian, Ben packs a bag and heads out the front door like a sad puppy. As integral as this episode is to the plot of the season, I would say it is definitely less effective at building tension when compared to the previous two episodes specifically, since this one largely focuses on the teen romance between Tate and Violet, which has personally never been a relationship I love to watch unfold. Similarly, another focus of this episode is the ghost of Hayden giving Ben all sorts of headaches, and Hayden, especially in ghost form, yells even more than Ben, and especially when they do share most of their scenes, the Ghost Hayden storyline is definitely another one of my least favorites of the season, so the fact that it is a focus of this episode as well probably contributes to why I'm not as fond of this episode as every other one we've watched so far. And it also feels like Ghost Hayden's storyline cuts into Moira's screen time a bit, and it shows in this episode that Moira's not really in it as much. So yeah, the Larry, Ben, Ghost Hayden storyline, much like Violet and Tate's romance, is just not as enticing to me personally as the plotlines more directly involving characters like Constance, Moira, or Vivian. Episode 5 is still a pretty standard episode, especially in today's standards. And if you are some way invested in Violet and Tate's romance and the stakes of Ben and Vivian's already doomed marriage matter to you, then this episode probably has a better chance at holding its own to you. But coming off of the previous 2 episodes, which I would say are the standouts so far, when it comes to delivering a scary and complete episode that also makes you want to watch the next one, I would say episode 5 pumps the brakes a little bit. Episode 6 begins with what I'd argue is the most infamous scene in this show's entire history, as we bear witness to Tate's 1994 school shooting from the perspective of his victims. Just for some personal backstory, I truly got into AHS around 2014, right when I was entering high school, and during an era where school shootings were starting to become more and more frequent in the United States. That statistical trend has unfortunately continued to rise ever since. All of that to say, the horror depicted in this scene definitely hit home to lots of teenage fans at the time, and despite the scene itself being based on the events of the 1999 Columbine massacre, unfortunately school shootings proved to be more common year by year in the United States. I won't be showing any clips from this scene because it's truly hard to watch and I honestly don't want to edit it. But after murdering several of his classmates in cold blood, Tate returns home to the murder house where the authorities soon have him cornered in his bedroom while you hear Constance protesting from downstairs. But before any triggers are pulled, the show cuts to the title sequence, still not ripping off that final band-aid on what has been painfully obvious for quite some time now, that Tate is a ghost. Back in the present day, though, they rip that band-aid right off as Violet discovers a 15-year-old headline thanks to the clues given to her by the ghosts of the teens. And she proceeds to learn about the extent of Tate's horrific crimes before going downstairs looking for her mother. Vivian is not home, but of course, Constance is. Constance figured Violet would find out about Tate soon enough, so she's here to share how she learned how to forgive Tate's actions.
We were living here when Tate lost his way. And I believe that the house drove him to it.
This truly sparks a major narrative question that echoes throughout this season. Is Constance and Larry's theory about the house corrupting otherwise good people true? Violet does not believe this, so Constance invites Violet over to her place where she's got some backup in the form of a medium Constance found years later on Craigslist, Billy Dean Howard. Billy is of course the first American Horror Story character to be played by Sarah Paulson, who has gone on to define so much of the show throughout her 9 seasons. Before AHS, Paulson was very much a working actor in several theater productions, films, and television shows, including an episode of Nip Tuck, which luckily brought the forces of Paulson and Ryan Murphy together for the first, but far from the last time. Billy Dean then makes a distinction between the 2 types of ghosts, the ones who knowingly wander the earth in refusal of moving on due to vengeful reasons, or there's also some who wander the earth not even knowing that they're dead, and Tate falls into the second category. Not the first nor the last time that the show will take a page from the playbook of The Sixth Sense. Constance says that her goal with getting Tate to see Ben was to hopefully ease Tate into realizing he's dead on his own, but since that's not working,
we must help him cross over, Violet.
Violet's still in denial of the supernatural until Billy delivers a message from Violet's grandmother that hits home.
I don't understand you. Never will understand you.
Does that mean anything to you?
Vivian dreams of her fetus having claws, then she gets Luke, the security guy, to do a sweep of the house before they overshare enough to learn something they have in common. Both of their spouses have cheated on them.
With another man.
Who's a woman?
Then Ben sees a patient named Derek who is terrified of urban legends. Sound familiar? That's because this scene serves as the jumping off point for a memorable in-universe urban legend called the Piggy Man that once again gets explored in AHS Season 6 Roanoke. Derek is played by Eric Stonestreet, who may be best known for his role on Modern Family, but like so many others in this season, he too first worked with Ryan Murphy in an episode of Nip Tuck. Derek name drops some other famous urban legends, including Bloody Mary, Candyman, and The Lady in White, which aside from Candyman, which they wouldn't have the rights to, AHS has adapted those other urban legends in one way or another later on in its run. Derek says he knows these stories are BS, but that doesn't stop the fear from being absolutely debilitating. Recently, the urban legend of the Piggy Man has tormented him the most. Piggy Man operates just like Candyman or Bloody Mary. Say his name 3 times and...
Here, Piggy, pig.
Don't worry, that's just Derek's anxious vision, as he says he's never actually said those dreaded 3 words in front of a mirror. But just as things are getting started, Ben ends his 2-minute long appointment and says they'll regroup on Wednesday.
In the meantime, I want you to shave. In a mirror? Can you try, Derek? Yeah.
In a short scene before this, Violet is shown self-harming again while seeing a flash of Tate. After Ben's session, Violet enters sobbing, claiming that the darkness has her. Constance comes over and gives Vivian a pig's throat and pancreas because she believes it will help with the morning sickness, and she instructs Moira to fry it up like she used to do for her.
We need that baby. We need another sweet child around here.
Moira fries up the throat, but leaves the pancreas raw and tries to guilt-trip Vivian into eating it. Then, I guess it's Wednesday because Derek's back for his next appointment already. I guess Ben's trying exposure therapy because he makes him go into the bathroom with the lights off where Derek tries the Piggy Man chant. Lucky for Derek, no Piggy Man gets summoned. But unfortunately, that is the bathtub where Gladys drowned, so of course she had to pay him a visit. Violet meets with Leah again at the empty swimming pool / skate park, and just like the last time we saw her, she's talking about the devil.
The devil is real. He can be beautiful. Because he's a fallen angel, and he used to be God's favorite.
Leah proceeds to retell a story from the Bible like it's the plot of a young adult novel. It's the story of the woman giving birth and the dragon with 7 heads, which represents Satan. As Leah puts it, in heaven, there's this woman giving birth and the dragon is there,
waiting so he can eat her baby. But the Archangel Michael, he hurls the dragon down to earth. From that moment on, the red dragon hates the woman and declares war on her and all of her children.
Since they've both been having trouble sleeping since their encounter with what Leah believes to be Satan, Violet asks for some of Leah's sleeping pills. Violet later visits Westfield High, where she meets one of Tate's victims who survived, a teacher who was left partially paralyzed by the shooting. Clearly trying to fact-check the whole "the house's darkness corrupted Tate" theory, Violet prods at this teacher for if Tate was always so troubled.
I just want to know why he did it.
Me too.
Why are you bullshitting me?
Violet is so audacious the way she treats this guy, who himself has likely dealt with a huge lack of closure for the past 15 years due to Tate dying before any motive could be revealed, just like all those vengeful ghosts we saw earlier. At the house, Moira takes a gift that Constance left for Vivian out of the fridge, another piece of raw meat, which Vivian soon discovers is a large brain. But for some reason, she barely hesitates before giving it a try, then going absolutely ham on it. While looking for Tate, Violet sees a bunch of the house's spiritual inhabitants, including the twins, the nurses, the killers who killed the nurses, as well as Charles Montgomery. Scared back into her room, she finds a message from Tate, which, in combination with the mayhem downstairs, causes her to break down. She then tries to end her life by taking a handful of Leah's sleeping pills, but Tate eventually finds her, drags her to the shower, where he tries to get her to vomit. Afterwards, Violet wakes up. In another session, Ben demands Derek go home and repeat the Piggyman mantra in full.
I can do it. The moment you do, you'll be free.
That evening, Derek does just that, and, well, I'll let you see how it went.
Here, piggy, piggy, pig. Who you calling a pig?
A robber who just so happened to be hiding in Derek's shower ironically shoots him directly in the head, killing him instantly. How the hell do we break this to Mitchell? After discovering that the nurse who fainted during the ultrasound quit her job right after the fact, Vivian tracks her down to a church to ask some follow-ups. Her name is Angela, and she's afraid to sit too close to Vivian, and that's because she soon reveals that
I saw the unclean thing, what you carry in your womb, the plague of nations, the beast.
Okay, so you didn't see anything, so...
Vivian is skeptical of the devil living inside of her, so she leaves this church while Angela yells scripture. Billie Dean Howard tells Constance that Adelaide's spirit is upset with her, and Constance says she wants to speak with her.
Talk to her. She's here. Come on.
Constance then apologizes for never saying how she truly felt about her.
I am so proud of you, Addie. I admire you so for what you were able to overcome. And I think you're beautiful. Addie, I think you are the most beautiful girl I ever met.
Billie Dean tells Constance that Addie says she's grateful that her spirit was unable to live on in the murder house because she now fears her brother, Tate, as I guess she has learned about his crimes in the afterlife. This triggers a flashback to Constance's perspective of the police raid on the murder house following the school shooting right before Tate's inevitable death. And upstairs, we see once and for all the moment Tate is gunned down after he makes a last-ditch grab for a handgun. Then back in the present day, while reading a book that Tate once checked out about birds from his high school library, Tate finally talks to Violet again.
I like birds too.
Why do you like them?
Because they can fly away when things get too crazy, I guess.
Through tears, Tate tells Violet he's noticed that she's been colder to him lately, and he wants to know if he should just leave her alone. Oh, and...
I love you.
Violet then holds Tate in her bed as we cut to credits. As you just saw, episode 6, just like so many other episode 6s in American Horror Story history, is a doozy. Aside from being everything else the show has established itself as, it still manages to be an unusually depressing episode, from the flashbacks to Tate's horrific crimes, as well as Violet's suicide attempt. And by the end of it, we see the true beginning of Violet and Tate's toxic tangle when they exchange I love yous, and boy am I looking forward to talking about how that turns out in the second half of the season. The episode also gives us 2 recurring figures in the lore of AHS, Billie Dean Howard and the Piggyman. As for Billie Dean, her introduction is perfect, and she immediately sets up another emotional Constance monologue when she connects Constance to Adelaide from beyond the grave. And while Constance apologizes to Adelaide for never telling her how proud she was of her, she doesn't apologize for the years of abuse. It's another Constance moment that just is oozing with extra layers of darkness that, in my experience, you really only find within the realm of these first few seasons of American Horror Story. Constance is also perturbed that Adelaide has discovered the truth about Tate in the afterlife, and she now fears her brother. As episode 6 concludes with Violet in Tate's arms, the major question that the first half of this season poses is whether or not Tate was truly possessed by the house's darkness when he committed his crimes both in 1994 and while he's been trapped within the walls of the house, and also by proxy, the character of Larry Harvey is also posing this same question as he has taken the Amityville defense after murdering his entire family in the murder house. So, will the season answer this ambiguity, or will it leave it open to interpretation a la The Shining? Welcome to part 2 of my deep dive on American Horror Story Murder House. In this one, we are breaking down the final 6 episodes of the season, alongside some of the season's unique promotional gimmicks, behind-the-scenes trivia, and more. But if you're all caught up on part 1, welcome back, and let's jump right into the meat of it all and unpack the next chapter of the Murder House saga. Episode 7, Open House, begins by establishing a previous romantic relationship between Constance Langdon and Larry Harvey in a flashback set in 1994, which also reveals the identity of another one of Constance's children, Beauregard. Constance tells Larry that she is being charged with child neglect, and Beauregard is to be locked in an institution. Using Larry's strong feelings for her, Constance instructs him to do some of the dirtiest of all dirty work by murdering her son so he will not face a life without his mother, as Constance puts it. Before Larry does the unthinkable, we bear witness to the horrendous living conditions Constance is subjecting Beau to. Beauregard's room is the attic of the murder house, where he remains chained to the floor seemingly at all times, with only a bed and a red ball to call his own. Some online sources have diagnosed Beauregard, but the show itself doesn't, aside from saying he has separation anxiety when away from Constance. This is yet another horrific scene revealing new layers of Constance's torment against her disabled children, while claiming such torment is for their own protection. In the present day, Dr. Hall gives Ben and Vivian some big news.
You're having twins.
What?
Then Marcy the realtor is back and better than ever.
Everything was meticulously restored by a couple of the previous homeowners.
This is the episode's titular open house, and Marcy is currently showing the house to a property developer named Joe, who wishes to bulldoze the entire property to build an apartment building. In the kitchen, Marcy and Vivian meet Larry for the first time, and Marcy gives him a pretty cold welcome.
Put down the stemware.
What are you doing?
What the hell, Marcy?
What you're doing is in direct violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
That night, Vivian masturbates while picturing Luke, the security guard she's been flirting with. Her fantasy then switches to Ben before ultimately becoming a much more violent memory of her rape at the hands of the rubber man. Disturbed, Vivian snaps out of her head shortly thereafter. Subsequently, Violet self-harms once again, and of course the camera does not hesitate to go for a close-up for about the 4th time this season, but unlike how they'd previously bonded over hurting themselves, Tate has now had a change of heart.
Promise me you'll never cut yourself again.
During a traditional family dinner, Ben proposes that Violet may be depressed, you think. Violet says she is upset that they moved states only for them to still break up, and she's also upset that they're selling her big spooky house. But
I'm not gonna off myself.
the next day, after finding out Larry has talked to Vivian, Ben takes things to the next level, becoming Sherlock Holmes entirely off-screen, and discovering Larry was never in prison, but he was rather institutionalized, and Ben thinks Larry's been lying about everything, from murdering his family to also murdering Hayden. But Larry ensures that not everything he said is a lie, although his true motives for wanting to drive the Harmons out of the house is so that he can buy it and win back none other than Constance Langdon. We then flash back to the actual incident that resulted in the death of Larry's family. It begins with Larry telling his wife Lorraine that he's having an affair with Constance. He also tells her to leave the house with the girls so he and Constance can live together. The flashback then cuts to smoke billowing out of a bedroom in the murder house, where Lorraine has locked herself and her daughters inside and set it ablaze. Then Vivian returns to the Eternal Darkness tour, with Marcy this time, to hear the rest of the house's history that she missed last time. Showing another famous Los Angeles murder site, we first see the gate of Nicole Brown Simpson's house, where she and Ron Goldman were murdered in 1994. Ryan Murphy Productions, of course, would again fixate on this location in the first spin-off to American American Horror Story, American Crime Story, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, which also features the likes of Murder House alums Connie Britton and Sarah Paulson. Then, stopping at the murder house, we of course get some more backstory to Charles, Nora, and Thaddeus Montgomery. In this flashback, Charles tells Nora he's brought their baby back to life. But when she sees what Thaddeus has become, Nora discovers his thirst for blood, and she attempts killing him. Nora gives Charles the validation he craves before shooting him in the head, then giving herself that same fate as well. In the basement, Larry meets with Constance, where his feelings for her are not reciprocated.
I love you.
Ugh. You're disgusting. You're weak.
He then admits,
The house didn't do this to me. You did this to me.
And eventually Larry informs her of Joe's plans to destroy this haunted mansion, and later in the attic, Beauregard shows his physical form to Violet, which scares her, but Tate calms her down.
They're appearing to you now because you're evolved.
Tate shows Violet a secret hole in the attic with some souvenirs of residents past, including a jar of God knows what from the Montgomerys, gay porn, presumably from those previous homos.
I think gay porn is hot.
Totally.
Also in the hole is Nora's silverware and photographs of all three Montgomerys. Constance visits Joe, the property developer, to try and convince him not to destroy the murder house. Constance takes a moral stance against destroying the homes of others for the sake of, in this case, apartment buildings. But obviously Constance truly just wants the souls trapped within the murder house's halls to remain there, both her loved ones and her enemies. She truly does not give a fuck about urbanization, and neither does Joe, because he literally then tells Constance to shut up and make him a sandwich. I am not joking. And elsewhere, Ben asks Tate to let him know if Violet is ever in serious trouble.
I wish you were my father. My life would have been a lot different.
Constance tries to talk to Tate after his session, but let's just say Tate's giving her the cold shoulder.
Turns out I hate my mother.
She then visits her other son for the first time all season, Beauregard.
Mama's got to say goodbye. They're gonna take you away from me. They're gonna take everything away. Forever.
In the kitchen, Moira says Constance will go to prison once Joe discovers the bones in the yard during the construction of a swimming pool Joe promised her.
There's not going to be a swimming pool, you stupid slut.
Another line from this season that will live for eternity. Master manipulator Constance then proposes she and Moira team up to get revenge on Joe, who Constance has framed as a liar with no intention of a swimming pool. To level out Joe's misogyny with her own misandry, Moira bites his before Larry suffocates him with the old plastic bag. The episode ends with Violet showing Vivian the photo of Nora that Tate found earlier, and Vivian recognized her from their encounter in episode 3. Despite giving us some great one-liners, this episode feels like a collection of side quests that, in the grand scheme of things, don't progress the story as much as desired. We return to the Eternal Darkness tour for the third time in this episode. Surely we could learn about the Montgomerys through a different framing device at this point, but alas. We also meet Joe, the property developer, who at first seems pretty important in this episode, but as he's killed at the very end of the episode, it's clear he was just a one-episode conflict to stretch out the actual conflicts with the Harmons and Constance and Moira, which I personally would much rather we get into now, but here we are. Filler episodes are not always bad. Take episode 2, Home Invasion, for instance, which managed to be interesting while still not being all that integral to the story. This episode and its Joe conflict is just dull, and Constance is just really racist the entire time. All in all, I just wish this episode pulled at one of its earlier loose threads to explore more in this episode rather than introducing this boring property guy. For instance, the detectives alluded to the robbers from episode 2 being a part of a cult recreating famous LA murders. Why not explore that a little more? But Joe is not the only thing in this episode, and story-wise, the episode episode has its moments, but it truly shines by amplifying side characters like Marcy and Larry, despite starting to push Vivian out of the main conflicts, which is an issue that plagues the rest of the season. Now, before we move on to episode 8, which makes up for this episode with some intense revelations, let's first take a peek at this season's unique marketing campaign. FX only released a handful of posters and teasers for the first season of AHS, but they clearly set the tone for the creepy and striking teasers of seasons to come. Some memorable teasers include several different visualizations of the season's key poster, as well as a visualization of the cast poster. There are a couple other tiny teasers, but there's not too much to get into there, and same goes with the very limited amount of different posters that were released. That said, the key art itself is one of the series' best, so the marketing team definitely made their limited designs count. One of the more unique ways FX decided to promote American Horror Story's first season was to conduct a short but sweet alternate reality game, or ARG. I personally am most familiar with the ARGs conducted for the first 2 Cloverfield films, but comparatively, AHS's ARG was, again, pretty sparse. Also, I didn't experience this ARG in person, and its website is long gone, so I am getting all of my information from the ARG's page on the AHS wiki, so thanks to all of the contributing editors for archiving some information on this piece of nearly lost AHS media. The ARG seems to give some non-canonical backstories to some residents of the murder house's past that never made it on screen, and that's because nobody on the show's creative team had any involvement with this ARG as far as I can tell, and it doesn't seem like the team that did work on it were given too much information about the show to go off of. But the ARG was presented through different illustrations of rooms in the murder house at different times, the first of which is the living room circa the 1940s. Unlike some of the other rooms, this one doesn't give any names, but it paints the picture of a murdered bride on her wedding day. In the kitchen, we learn about some inhabitants during the 50s, married couple William and Lorraine Baxter. The evidence in this room points to William being abusive towards Lorraine, and it also details William's affair with one of Lorraine's close friends named Celia Jacobs. Actually, it was Celia who owned the murder house at this time, and when Lorraine caught them there, she killed them both. Authorities eventually found Lorraine with her head in the oven, suggesting she killed herself shortly after. However, as we know, the ghosts can pose crime scenes in the murder house to present whatever narratives they want. The attics portion of the ARG is set in the 1970s and tells a dark and short tale of a kid named Alex and his younger sister. Alex was troubled with visions of imaginary friends that eventually took a violent turn, resulting in Alex murdering and dismembering his sister, before he himself died in the house due to unspecified causes. The library takes us to the 80s with another married couple, Marie Nikki Argento and Stanley Samuel Argento. Their story is also dark and short, as they were murdered while filming themselves engaging in BDSM, but their killer was never found. The study tells a story about an anthropologist named V in the 2000s, whose story was left largely open-ended, but fans theorize V and their spouse were either serial killers together, or V might have murdered their entire family for being quote-unquote unclean, as there was evidence to show that she prioritized cleanliness. Lastly, the ARG featured the basement as well, but down there fans would only be able to find an exclusive clip from the then upcoming pilot episode. Some overarching themes in the ARG that also have a presence in AHS Murder House are infidelity, dismemberment, mental illness, and domestic violence. Let me know in the comments below if you played the ARG back in the day and if there's any details that I missed, but now let's unpack the next episode. Entitled Rubberman, Episode 8 once and for all reveals the identity of the man behind the rubber suit. Flashing back to 6 months ago when the Harmons first moved in, we hear Tate console a confused Nora Montgomery, distressed by the state of the house and confused about where Thaddeus is, who she says is all she wants. So we then see Tate himself take the rubber suit out of the trash can where Ben tossed it in the pilot, and after a shortened version of that episode's assault scene, we see Tate in the rubber suit as he passes Ben on the stairs before he unmasks in front of a mirror. This episode gives the clear answer that Tate is Vivian's rapist, and he did it with the intention of giving Nora Montgomery a child. Back in the present, Vivian discusses her sighting of Nora Montgomery with one ghost and Immortal. Another flashback to the previous homos, God rest their souls, we get an origin story to the rubber suit itself. Turns out Patrick's been on a BDSM chat board with a user named
JungleJim4322@yahoo.com.
Chad's friend gives him some bad advice and says he has to go out of his comfort zone and get into BDSM, otherwise he will lose Patrick, so Chad then heads to a sex shop and buys the damned rubber suit. When Chad puts it on for Patrick though, Patrick body shames him, so Chad asks, plain and simple,
Who is JungleJim4322@yahoo.com?
Patrick says Chad's interior decoration hobby has made him unattractive, so Chad kicks him out. Back in the present, the ghosts of Nora and Hayden interact, and she tells it to the constantly confused Nora how it is.
We died in here, and for whatever reason, we can't leave.
What are you implying?
We then see Hayden being likable for a change, although in her defense, this is her first scene not having to do with Ben, as she plays with the ghost of Beauregard and refers to him as one of the innocent, beautiful souls without malice or anger.
It's not fair that they're trapped in a place like this.
She contrasts the spirits like Beau with spirits like Moira and Hugo, who she calls the bitches, her words, not mine. Then, in slight flashbacks to Hayden's short time as a ghost here, we see Moira defending Vivian's honor, and we also see Hayden having an affair with Hugo, although this eventually turns into her stabbing him repeatedly in the chest.
Hey, you want anything from the kitchen?
It doesn't stick.
Hayden then gives Nora the clues to remember the circumstances to her own death, and she also plants the idea of the both of them taking Vivian's twins, one for each of them, having both lost a child. Hayden later becomes a poltergeist and spooks the hell out of Vivian, who eventually finds the rubber mask planted in the bathroom, which transitions to another flashback of Tate suiting up the night that Chad and Patrick were killed, leaving us without a shadow of a doubt that Tate was behind all of the Rubber Man's actions that we've seen so far. The episode then lets Chad and Patrick's deaths play out longer than we previously saw, and we see a truly horrifying and, in my opinion, unnecessary sequence of shots that show Tate sexually mutilating Patrick's corpse. What the fuck, Ryan Murphy? After Tate tosses Patrick's body down the basement, Nora finds it and is very disturbed, and she once again asks Tate where her baby is. Tate tells her that he killed Chad and Patrick because they couldn't give Nora a baby, so with them gone, there's a chance that a new family will move in who can. Once again, back in the present day, Ben finds out Violet's been skipping school for weeks, but Violet says Ben's affair drove Vivian crazy, and that's the root of all of their issues. Vivian is convinced her nausea medicine is causing her to hallucinate, and Moira comforts her.
And everybody thinks I'm crazy. I know Ben does, I know.
That's what men do. They make you think you're crazy so they can have their fun.
Moira recommends Vivian read the 1892 short story The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, which tells the story of a woman in first person who is subjected to bed rest, trapped in a room by her husband shortly after giving birth. And as the story progresses, her sense of reality is warped and her mental health severely deteriorates. Not only is this a classic 19th century work of horror fiction, it's also notable for its feminist themes, especially for its time. It's also got some notable parallels with this season, like spousal gaslighting, unreliable narrators, and of course, a big spooky mansion. After Moira gives Vivian some more horrifying facts about the history of women's rights, she drops a rather big bomb for our little skeptic.
But this house is possessed. There are spirits here. Malevolent spirits.
But Vivian believes Moira, and when Moira says that she is in danger, Vivian immediately wakes Violet up and says that they are getting the hell out tonight.
We're going to Aunt Joe's.
What? We're not spending another night here.
Was Aunt Joe not an option this entire time? Because However, when Vivian and Violet get in the car, the ghosts of the home invaders from episode 2 appear in the back seat, prompting the Harmons to run back inside. The next morning, Ben gets back to doing what he does best, gaslighting, despite Vivian insisting that both she and Violet saw them within a foot of their faces. Ben says that the both of them just never dealt with the trauma from the night of the home invasion. Vivian needs a gun.
I am gonna bash your goddamn face in!
Fine. Let's discuss the brain eating.
This episode is too damn much.
Mad cow disease, Vivian? Have you ever heard of that?
Upstairs, Violet and Tate have off-screen sex for the first time, which, having that occur in the very episode where Tate is revealed as the Rubber Man, to me sends a clear message that Tate is clearly a disgusting piece of ectoplasm, and in no way is this quote-unquote teen romance meant to be romanticized. Because this entire scene subtextually feels just as gross as the one when Tate quote-unquote pretended to attack Violet while wearing the rubber suit in the basement. Violet tells Tate about seeing the ghosts of the robbers, and Tate says that she can't tell the truth about seeing them, otherwise they'll try to take her away and put her in a mental hospital. As Ben continues to tell Vivian she's crazy downstairs, Vivian begins to theorize that Ben is pulling an Ivy Mayfair Richards and plotting against her alongside Hayden and his other patients. She also brings up the rubber mask that was planted in the bathroom, but Violet interrupts the conversation. Because of Tate, Violet lies and says that she only told the cops what she thought Vivian wanted her to say, and that there was actually nothing in the back seat. Vivian, let's just end the season right here and pull an Amityville 2 on these assholes. In the basement, Ghost Hayden sexually harasses a ghost teenager, so I'm back on the anti-Hayden train. Vivian invites Marcy over with the intention of stealing her gun. That's what I've been saying, Vivian. So she fakes a migraine and steals the gun out of Marcy's tiny purse. Surely she won't notice that missing weight, and she doesn't. Mission accomplished. That night, Vivian is haunted by Tate in the rubber suit, who eventually attacks her before vanishing. Entering the room after hearing Vivian scream, Vivian shoots Ben in the stomach. When paramedics arrive, Ben refuses to be seen by a doctor, and that never comes up again. He just heals from this. Luke shows up and advocates for Vivian like the man he is, and lets the authorities know that Ben doesn't live here, and he also tells them about Hayden's history. Later that night, Hayden wakes up Vivian with a tried and true method.
Wake up!
Hayden tells Vivian the Rubber Man's the true father of the babies, and Tate in the suit then enters and attacks Vivian, once again attempting to rape her. But Vivian is soon awoken by Ben and Luke, and soon enough, Vivian is forcefully removed from the house by cops and taken to the hospital for an evaluation. Episode 8 is a lot. Revealing the Rubber Man to be Tate, no matter how much it has been hinted at already, is horrifying in its reality, and the episode pushes the boundaries even further than I remember it doing. Like I mentioned in my last video, the last time I rewatched Murder House before making this deep dive was around 2018, and I've truly forgotten some major details about the story in the years since. For instance, this episode's graphic depiction of Patrick's death was a complete unpleasant surprise to me, especially since it further complicates the story's complicated handling of sexual violence. Patrick will later get an opportunity to beat the shit out of Tate, but despite the show explicitly showing Tate murdering and abusing Patrick, the sexual element of the murder is never acknowledged with any dialogue. And additionally, the scene itself is gratuitous with what it shows in terms of violence and nudity. Off the top of my head, I can think of some other instances of the show's questionable portrayals of male victims of sexual violence. I point this out to say that alongside the show's inconsistent portrayal of sexual assault itself, I also want to start to pay attention to this specific nuance that I feel like I'm noticing as I continue with these deep dives. This episode is, of course, most notorious for its confirmation that Tate is the Rubber Man, and another thing that slipped my mind before rewatching it this time is that the episode tries to explain Tate's motive behind his heinous post-mortem activities in the rubber suit. His bond with the ghost of Nora Montgomery that he developed while he was still alive, which was exacerbated by Tate's mommy issues, gave him the goal of giving a baby baby to Nora, whose ghost self, of course, is lost in perpetual sorrow, mourning baby Thaddeus. So Tate killed Chad and Patrick in hopes that a family would move in, and when the Harmons came in with all their emotional baggage, he decided to take matters into his own hands. The show isn't trying to excuse any of his actions by giving us this explanation, and while I don't find the Nora explanation particularly great, I do appreciate that the show is starting to try to give us all of the pieces to the puzzle of Tate's mental state rather than leaving it completely open. This episode is also when Tate and Violet have sex for the first time, which is spine-chilling within the context of the episode and sent shockwaves into the teen fans that had ignored all of the signs that Tate was behind the mask and professed that he and Violet were meant to be. I was a wee child at the time, so I'm not a first-hand source on this by any means, but I imagine a lot of Tate fans jumped ship after this episode, but infamously, some edgy teens doubled down with their adoration for this irredeemable monster who escaped the gates of hell. As most of you probably know, Tate Langdon and Violet Harmon were what the youngsters call a ship back in the day, meaning fans of the show wanted these two characters to be together romantically. Obviously, the show sets that right up. I remember around 2018, pre-apocalypse, the Tate and Violet fans were still pretty loud, and unfortunately, I do think they shaped some of the way that that season ended up going in regards to these characters. But nonetheless, while lurking on the AHS subreddit recently, someone asked that age-old question, why do people romanticize Tate? And I think since it is a very nuanced conversation that I definitely was not a part of back in 2011, the top comment on this post might be more enlightening than anything that I could speculate. They said, I remember when this season first came out, it was the height of the usage of Tumblr and Wattpad, along with the dark emo, grudge, bad boy romance fanfictions and aesthetics. So I guess it became so romanticized to the point that some overlooked what he had done, while some saw a shed of hope that maybe he was good inside and could change. I think that sums up most of it, and of course there's also a history of particularly young people crushing on real-life serial killers, so it's definitely not unprecedented, even if it may rub some of us a weird way. Episode 9, Spooky Little Girl, starts in 1947 with one of the most famous figures to ever cross paths with the murder house, Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia. If you're unaware, this is another instance of the show intertwining a true crime tale with its own lore, as Elizabeth Short is tragically known for being the victim of a brutal murder. At the time of her death, Elizabeth was just 22 years old and was working as a waitress, trying to make a living in Los Angeles just a year after her fiancé died in action during World War II. Her murder captured national attention due to its gruesome nature, and to this day it remains unsolved. In this era of the murder house around 1947, we learn it is owned by a dentist who runs his practice out of the mansion, just like the doctor who came before him and the psychiatrist who came after. The show goes with a popular characterization of Elizabeth Short as an aspiring actress, and she tells the dentist that she's short on cash and she hopes they can make an arrangement. After she is put under, the show cuts to the next scene, which is its depiction of the discovery of Elizabeth's body, which the show recreates all of the true crime's horrifying details. The 2011 timeline then continues with an argument between a highly intoxicated Constance and Travis that ends with Constance sending him out for more cigarettes. On the way to the store though, he's catcalled by Hayden, and after they hook up, Travis says he's in love with Constance. Later, Elizabeth Short walks into Ben's office requesting an emergency session.
It's a strange feeling, an endless foreboding, like a dream I can't wake myself out of.
Sounds like acute anxiety.
Elizabeth tries to pay Ben with sex, and despite fantasizing about engaging with her, Ben turns her down. Soon after, Ben gets a call from Dr. Hall, informing him that Vivian's babies are a rare instance of twins that have different fathers.
Your wife must have had intercourse with two different men during the same ovulation cycle.
Constance searches the house for Violet after incorrectly assuming she's slept with Travis, and Moira informs her of the newly discovered information that Vivian's twins are from different fathers. Immediately fearing that Tate is the other father, Constance desperately tries to talk to her son, who eventually appears to her and entertains a full conversation for once.
What's wrong with you? Don't you realize what you've done?
We We will soon realize what exactly Tate has done. But anyway, elsewhere, Ben walks in on Moira and Elizabeth having sex, which reveals an interesting note to the nature of Moira's dual appearances, as Elizabeth sees Moira's younger self, unlike the other female characters' perspectives we've been shown so far. But heartbroken that Ben doesn't join in with them, Elizabeth is later comforted by Hayden.
My dreams will never come true. I must become famous.
Honey, don't you know who you are?
The show then flashes back to where we left off with Elizabeth's visit to the dentist, where we see her being raped by the dentist while she is unconscious. In doing this, it appears the dentist inadvertently killed her from too much gas. He takes her corpse down to the basement, where it is the ghost of Charles Montgomery who mutilates the body.
I really did become somebody.
At the mental hospital where Vivian is being kept, a doctor tells Ben that she has been restrained after attacking a doctor who had suggested that her visions of the rubber man could be a sexual fantasy. Now trapped in a cement cell without any yellow wallpaper to peel off, Vivian is a shell of herself, and Ben is an absolute monster.
You're thinking, thank God he's here. Thank God he can see what they're doing to me and how wrong it is. You're in hell here. And I'd move heaven and earth for the Vivian I thought I was married to. But you aren't her. You're a stranger to me.
Because he knows Vivian's twins are fathered by two separate people, he's already decided that Vivian is a traitor and a liar and a cheater, without Vivian being given a chance to prove her innocence due to the fact that he's had her institutionalized and now sedated.
I wouldn't lift a finger to help you get out of here.
And back at the house, Ben tells Hayden they will never be together because he has never loved her. Hayden then lies to Ben and says that Vivian and Luke have been having an affair, which Ben of course believes instantly. Constance proposes to Travis, saying there will soon be a baby she will have to care for, and he would be a great father. But Travis says he's not ready for all that, and he still wants to pursue a modeling career.
What career? What?
This dream you have of appearing half naked in your skivvies 60 feet high above Times Square.
I know that dream. I had that dream.
Their argument turns violent, Constance threatens him, and Travis departs to go have sex with Hayden once again. Afterwards, he professes he still loves Constance, and now he's ready to be a father. But Travis's sudden change of heart is short-lived as Hayden stabs him right in the old ticker. Then the ghosts of Hayden, Elizabeth Short, Charles Montgomery, and Travis himself debate how they're going to get Travis's body out of the house. Off-screen, Charles mutilates Travis's corpse in the same way he did to Elizabeth, and with the help of Larry Harvey, Travis's remains are planted in a park. Constance visits Vivian at the mental hospital, and Vivian again notes how abnormally fast the pregnancy is moving. On her way out, Constance says she feels for Vivian's situation, and Vivian flat out tells Constance she was raped, and she knows it was not a hallucination.
Well, of course not. Honey, I never doubted it for a minute.
Back at the house, Ben confronts Luke about the affair that Hayden lied about, but Luke tells Ben that he can't reproduce, so Ben asks Moira for some more details about the rubber suit.
I think I made a horrible mistake by putting Vivian in the hospital.
Congratulations, Dr. Harmon.
You're finally beginning to see things as they are.
As Moira delivers that line, she transitions from younger to older Moira while still only within Ben's perspective, suggesting her older portrayal only appears to those who see things unclouded by judgment, or more likely that Moira herself controls the perspective switch at her own will. It seems up to interpretation to me. Fearful of the consequences of the dead having intercourse with the living, Constance calls Billie Dean over again and asks her directly what would go down. And Billie Dean says,
You do know about the box? The Pope's box?
What the hell are you talking about?
She explains that each newly elected pope is ceremoniously shown into the quote-unquote room of tears, where he opens a box that
contains the ultimate secret. It holds the secret of the end of the world.
Cut to the chase.
This piece of paper reveals the precise nature of the Antichrist.
Billie Dean, who I guess is best friends with the Pope, explains that if a spirit and a mortal were to ever successfully reproduce, that child would be the Antichrist and would bring upon the apocalypse. And that prophecy is what is contained in this ultra-secret box that each pope is shown. So, ghost plus human equals Antichrist baby that will bring upon the apocalypse. Wow, they should totally make a season about that. In reality, though, the Pope's box is almost entirely based in conspiracy theory, and the Room of Tears itself is ceremoniously just where the new Pope changes into their official robes for the first time. Regardless, Billy Dean's retelling of the prophecy of the Pope's box scares the hell out of Constance, and most definitely has a lasting impact on the series. Another episode full of side quests and side characters. I'd say it's most memorable for its depiction of Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia. Now, unlike Sal Mineo, the show opted to make Elizabeth Short into an entire character, and it solves her unsolved murder by connecting it to the lore of the murder house. There are things about her scenes that I enjoy, and actress Mina Suvari does a great job embodying her. However, I also think there are some very insensitive things the showrunners chose to do about this very real and very horrific true crime. Call me sensitive, but for one, they chose to recreate the mutilated corpse, which must have been a particularly dark few weeks in the props department, and additionally, the show takes a lot of creative liberties with its portrayal of Elizabeth, who, remember, was only 22 years old when she was killed. Not only is her dream of being a famous actress not entirely based in reality, they proceed to create several sexual elements to their version of Elizabeth, which of course also have no evidence in reality. Within the show, not only is she the victim of rape, she is shown offering to pay for Ben's psychiatry services with sex, and she's also shown having intercourse with Moira, all within the runtime of this episode. From a writing and character perspective, a lot of this just rubbed me the wrong way, especially considering the context of the Black Dahlia and how there is so little information about who she was as a person. This episode also shows Vivian being locked away and Ben being somehow even worse than he was being this whole time, and by the end of it, Billy Dean Howard's talking about the Pope and setting up a season 8 years down the line. The second half of Murder House is definitely much less balanced, and it's now the point in the season where it's time to start wrapping things up, not introducing more plot points that simply cannot all be wrapped up within 3 episodes. The 10th episode, entitled Smoldering Children, again starts in 1994, during a dinner between Constance, Larry, Tate, and Adelaide. Tate brings up how Larry's wife killed herself and their children, but as you see, Larry's face is unscarred, meaning his injuries came from a separate incident. Tate correctly accuses Larry of being responsible for Beauregard's death, but Constance insists he died of natural causes. After telling Constance he'll never be her perfect son, he goes upstairs to his room where he ingests some substances and loads up his guns. Afterwards, he visits Larry at his day job where he douses him in gasoline and lights a match, revealing that the true origin of Larry's scars was Tate getting payback for Larry murdering Beauregard. He doesn't know that his mother was in on it as well, but all of this seems to also indicate some potential motives for Tate's violent rampage sometime after attempting to murder Larry. In the present timeline, Ben visits Vivian at the hospital and apologizes, and he says he now believes her because of his talk with Luke. Ben also reveals to Vivian for the first time that her twins have 2 different fathers. Ben promises to get Vivian out of the hospital as soon as possible, but Vivian insists that she will not move back into the murder house, which seems more than fair to me. Constance is later visited by detectives to identify crime scene photos of Travis's body, and she confirms the remains are his, but Constance is unable to give the detectives any leads. A cop then arrives at the murder house to do a wellness check on Violet, who hasn't been to school for 16 days now, and he's taken aback by the group of flies circling a bowl of apples. Surely another reference to the Amityville Horror, but unlike in that film, the exterminator suggests these aren't omens of the devil, they're just coming from something rotting in the house's vast crawl spaces. At Larry's apartment, Constance visits and accuses him of killing Travis, so Larry tells her the truth about Hayden killing him in the murder house, so Constance leaves to try and talk to Travis's ghost. Constance is later questioned by the detectives again, who bring up the death of Beauregard, Tate's crimes, as well as the disappearances of Hugo Langdon and Moira O'Hara, who back in the day, detectives believed Constance was responsible for. But of course, they were unable to ever find either of their their bodies. Flashbacks then reveal that Constance refused to bury Hugo in the same grave as Moira, so she ground his body up into food for her dogs. A lawyer shows up and warns Constance that the Boy Dahlia case has garnered a lot of attention, so the police department wants to pin it on somebody quick, and right now, that's Constance. Larry goes snooping in the basement when the ghost of Travis shows up. Travis is down here because he's having a tea party with two ghost children who we've yet to meet, Margaret and Angela Harvey, Larry's daughters. As he watches his daughters sip tea with Travis, Larry's wife Lorraine shows herself to him for the first time. Larry promises he's going to make Constance pay for destroying their family, but Lorraine says that the only person who broke a vow was Larry. Lorraine also tells Larry that he doesn't have much time left alive. Then, while doing a Terminator impression, the exterminator enters the crawl spaces of the murder house to try and find the source of the fly infestation. He is horrified at what he eventually finds, but the audience is left out of the loop for now. Tate quickly appears and murders Mr. Exterminator with his own chemicals. Afterwards, Tate overhears Ben talking to a college admissions office about Violet, and he quickly warns Violet that her dad is trying to send her away. Tate soon suits up to attack Ben, but Ben is able to overpower him on several different occasions. Ben unmasks Tate, but only shortly before he passes out due to Tate's chemical rag. Tate tells Violet he made it so her dad would leave them alone for an hour, while Tate says he thought of a perfect plan to make them both free and happy. He tells Violet that they need to kill themselves. Violet says she'll go set things up, but once she's out of the attic, she cries out for help, saying that Tate is trying to murder her. Tate chases after her, so she tries to run out of the house's front gates, but when she walks through them, she immediately enters the house through the kitchen. She repeats this strategy a few times more, in hysterics, trying to comprehend what is happening. Tate tries to enlighten her, but he eventually decides to just show her. In the basement, Tate reveals the abandoned crawl space that has been storing Violet's own dead body.
A dead body. Dead bodies. How's this look, huh? New looks?
The show then flashes back to Violet's suicide attempt from episode 6, revealing that Tate was actually unable to save her in that shower, and Violet died that day and has been unknowingly living as a ghost ever since.
I had this idea that if you chose to die with me, you wouldn't be so sad.
At the police station, Larry turns himself in as the sole murderer of Travis, and the police take his word for it. With only 2 episodes to go following this, episode 10 does its best to give us all of the necessary information to set up episode 11, which in a lot of ways feels like a finale, while episode 12 itself feels more like an epilogue. But the resulting episode, episode 10, is actually pretty exposition heavy as a result, but it is of course leading to the biggest reveal of the season, that Violet has been dead since her suicide attempt in episode 6. Much like Tate's reveals of being dead and also being the Rubber Man, Violet's reveal had a ton of hints along the way as well, to the point where, to me, it felt painfully obvious before the show inevitably ripped the band-aid off. But I had a similar experience rewatching The Sixth Sense recently, so I think I can't be too hard on twists that end up being so heavily ingrained into common knowledge, and clearly the Violet twist was the most effective twist of the season, and it certainly is a climactic moment nailed by Thaisa Farmiga, Evan Peters, and every creative person involved in achieving the sequence itself, because it's one that belongs in a horror hall of fame if there ever were one. I thought the reveal about Tate being responsible for Larry's scars as revenge for Larry murdering Beauregard was unexpected and provides enough context for us to start piecing together the reasons behind the downfall of Tate Langdon in 1994. Additionally, the show never lets up with painting Constance as a reprehensible villain, and she continues to push those boundaries with her intense dialogue in this episode as well. The penultimate episode of AHS's inaugural season is entitled Birth, and it's pretty climactic as the title suggests. Beginning with a flashback as usual, this time to 1984, we find Constance Langdon deep in an alcoholic depression while a young Tate Langdon is attacked by the infantata, before the ghost of Nora rescues him.
No, Thaddeus, go away!
In the present day, Tate checks up on a sobbing Nora who does not recognize him, and she is still asking where her baby is. She remembers fragments of Tate's plan to get her a baby though, but Tate now tells her he can no longer fulfill that promise.
I'm in love with Violet. I just can't take her brother away.
But I can. And I will.
Meanwhile, Ben forces Violet to get in the car to visit Vivian at the hospital, but he doesn't notice when she vanishes from the back seat. Tate and Violet walk in on the previous homos decorating the nursery, who tell them that they also intend on stealing Vivian's twins for themselves. What the hell, sure. Violet later tells Constance of Chad and Patrick's plans, so she later confronts them in the nursery, where they've now painted the furniture bright red. During the flamingly homophobic confrontation, Constance accidentally lets it slip that Tate fathered one of the twins, and she tries to make a deal so that they can only kidnap the child that Ben fathered, but Chad refuses that offer. As Vivian packs her things as she's been discharged from the hospital, she promises her doctor that she'll be completely safe traveling to her sister's house in Florida. Well, damn, that is pretty far. But Vivian says it's fine. She's still only 6 months pregnant. However, the doctor warns
one of these babies has been developing at a rapid rate,
and he worries that an emergency C-section may be needed sooner than expected, especially for the survival of the other twin.
All the necessary nutrients are being devoured by the larger fetus, the alpha, if you will.
In the next scene, Billie Dean returns to the murder house because Constance has a request that requires her expertise.
Can you ferret out the fairies for us?
She wants to banish Chad and Patrick's spirits from the house, but Billie says she must first untether them from the strong force of darkness within the house.
You'll see it all the time in places like prisons or asylums. Negative energy feeds on trauma and pain. It draws those things to it.
This line of dialogue in particular sparked a sometimes consistent trend where the showrunners would hide clues towards the next season's theme within the show itself.
But what do we do about the gays? I mean, how do we get rid of them?
Billie makes Tate leave before she continues her attempt to potentially commit a spiritual hate crime, but when she speaks to Tate, it very clearly takes a negative toll on her. With him out of the room, Billie Dean exposition dumps about the very complicated way you can banish a spirit, but in reality, it's just by shouting a singular word. As we discussed in my Roanoke deep dive, it was here in Murder House that AHS first talked about the lost colony of Roanoke, as Billie Dean explains in this scene that the lost colonists actually died where they were abandoned, and their spirits went on to haunt and murder nearby indigenous people. One day, though, the indigenous people fought back against the ghost colonists with a banishment curse.
How? By uttering a single word. Croatoan.
There is obviously so much wrong about the show's first vague portrayal of indigenous cultures, and Roanoke doesn't even use this flashback's timeline of events, but as we soon see, it doesn't matter for all that long because shouting Croatoan has no effect on the murder house ghosts. After being sent on a quest to retrieve a personal item of the gays by Violet, Tate tries flirting with Patrick to get the job done, but Patrick takes this as a chance to rightfully beat the shit out of Tate.
I'm not supposed to be here!
Vivian and Ben arrive at the house to grab their things before ignoring the doctor's recommendations and heading to Florida, and Vivian refuses to enter the house until she begins to experience painful contractions. When Ben tries to go get Violet to leave the house again, which of course she can't do, Vi pleads with her dad to leave and get Vivian far away from the house. Not listening to her, Violet tries to tell Ben that she is dead, but Ben then accuses her of being on drugs. Later in the basement, Violet tries yelling Croatoan at Chad, but like I said, that doesn't work here. But lucky for Violet, Chad no longer wants to kidnap the babies because he's finally realized that Patrick doesn't love him. Chad then bluntly enlightens Violet on the fact that Tate was behind the murders of himself, Patrick, as well as Vivian's rape. Constance ushers Vivian into the house against her will.
Child is ready to be born. There's no stopping it.
Vivian gets inside the house. Shit starts to get real spooky as the redheaded twins fuck up the Harmons' car and the power goes out.
Dr. Harmon, it's time.
As Vivian enters labor, she is attended to by Dr. Charles Montgomery and nurses Maria and Gladys. With his brain running on Internet Explorer, Ben finally figures out that this house might just be haunted after all. Meanwhile, Vivian's pain is insurmountable and she first delivers a stillborn. Soon after, it's time for the big one as complications ensue. But after a long ordeal, Vivian gives birth to the second baby, who comes out healthy. Constance refuses to hand the baby to Vivian, and as she ushers him away, Vivian dozes off and loses consciousness. As Ben sobs, Vivian transitions into the spirit realm, unable to be rescued by Charles' 20th century medicine. Violet then confronts Tate for all of his lies, including lying about not knowing he was dead, how he died, and what he did leading up to his death. Tate owns up to knowing he was dead the whole time, but he continues to act naive about the school shooting.
Why would I do that? Why would I do that? Why would I do that?
Violet then asks him why he killed Chad and Patrick, and also why he assaulted Vivian.
I'm sorry. I was different then.
I used to think you were like me. You were attracted to the darkness. But Tate, you are the darkness.
Tate then goes into master metaphysical manipulation mode, saying that Violet has been his only reprieve from the darkness, and that their relationship is his form of salvation.
I love you, Tate. But I can't forgive you. You have to pay for what you did.
Violet says she refuses to be with Tate, especially now that his spawn killed her mom. So to make this breakup official, Violet does the ghost banishing spell that Tate taught her, and he himself was taught by Nora, which is very simply telling the ghost to go away.
Go away, Tate. You're all I want.
As Violet sobs in Tate's absence, she is soon comforted by the ghost of Vivian.
It was very brave.
Unlike Ben and Vivian, Violet does get a pretty good conclusion in this episode, which feels more like a finale than the actual finale. Violet's slow acceptance of the magnitude of Tate's darkness, building towards her finally rejecting him, I thought was very well done in episode 11. Violet makes a truly tough choice that builds a ton of her personal character and affirms her and her mother's relationship, ended on a more positive note. I also liked how explicitly the episode confirms Tate was lying about everything, like not knowing he was dead at the beginning of the season. And he eventually does take accountability for what he did to Vivian, at the very least, proving he does take ownership of his worst actions. And we're not going to keep pushing the theory that the house's darkness is possessing him to do those things. And despite how complicated of a character Tate seemed to be at first, this episode does give us enough context to put together some sort of motive. The school shooting was directly preceded by several life-altering shifts in Tate's home life, a new father figure that Tate despised, and the death of Tate's brother, Beauregard, who Tate correctly suspected was murdered by Larry. This gives him motive to do what he did next, attempting to murder Larry, and shortly after committing the massacre at his high school. And again, the show tells us that his bond with Nora is what persuaded him to commit more atrocities to ensure that she would have a child again. Some final notes on this episode. Billie Dean in this season has always walked the line of being an actual medium or being a phony. This episode, though, she is clearly way off base with her Croatoan theory, which to me suggests that she may not know all of what she claims to. Lastly, the episode's last-minute side plots with both Hayden and the gays wanting to steal Vivian's babies felt very unnecessary because their reasons for wanting the babies were far less compelling than both Constance and Nora's, and ultimately the show did favor the more compelling storylines, and those other two parties wanting the babies purely felt like padding the runtime. Now, before we move on to the final episode of Murder House, there is a bit of production tea to sip on first. Because if you remember, all the way back in the beginning, FX picked up AHS for 13 episodes, and that remained the case until very late in production. However, as you may know, Murder House actually only has 12 episodes. You may also recall me saying that AHS was forced into a rushed and hectic production schedule as the showrunners were simultaneously running Glee's second season. As an article in Deadline revealed back in the day, because of the complexity of shooting many of the episodes of Murder House, their shooting schedules kept getting more and more delayed, eventually forcing the showrunners and FX to make a decision around November to either cut the 13th episode entirely or shoot and air it sometime after the winter break. Given the inconvenience of that second option, Murphy ended up combining whatever material was written for episode 13 into episode 12, and with commercial breaks, the 12th and final episode aired as a 90-minute finale, which accounts for about 20 to 30 minutes of cut material from that elusive, originally scripted episode 13. So now that you know some of the context behind this truly odd finale, in my opinion, let's now unpack it once and for all. The final episode of AHS Murder House, entitled Afterbirth, again starts with a flashback. This time it's to back when the Harmons were living in Boston, shortly after Vivian caught Ben cheating. Vivian says she's going to Florida to live with her sister. She's given the LA move more thought, and she can't get over the affair after all. But Ben manipulates her to agree to visiting LA to see a house that he has his eyes on. The next scene cuts back to where the last episode left off, where Ben is now alone in the house, wandering the halls, looking for his deceased family members. Later, Constance offers free childcare to Ben, but he says Vivian's sister will be taking care of the sitting. But obviously, Constance refuses to let go of the baby so easily, and she professes that the dangers of the murder house are too dangerous for the newborn. Ben's unobservant ass also realizes for the first time in this scene that Tate's been long dead, and he now blames Constance for the hell of the previous 6 months.
You are paying for your own sins.
Moira helps Vivian adjust to the afterlife, and Vivian says that she's making sure she and Violet don't show themselves to Ben so he won't want to stay there with them. But Vivian immediately has to cross that line to prevent Ben from killing himself. Ben still begs to stay with her and Violet, but Vivian says she wants Ben to raise her son. Violet appears too and says every moment Ben and the baby spend inside the house is a moment their lives are in danger. Finally convinced, Ben heads out with the baby, but at the stairs he is stopped by Hayden, Larry, and the robbers, who attack Ben and murder him by hanging him from the chandelier.
Now we have all the time in the world.
With Ben's death, the last remaining Harmons are the still unnamed baby, and of course Hallie, who in the next scene we see is being looked after by Marcy, the realtor.
I've adopted her.
Marcy is showing the murder house to some potential buyers, the Ramos family, Miguel, Stacy, and Gabe, and she has to share the unfortunate news of the Harmons passings, yet she omits any details about Violet's death for no apparent reason. The dad, Miguel, is played by Anthony Ruvivar, who you may know from playing Richard Ramirez when he briefly appears in AHS Hotel, and he's also in some other horror TV shows, including The Haunting of Hill House and Scream. The Ramos family buys the house, best of luck to them, and next door, Constance gives a statement to detectives who let us know that Vivian's newborn is now missing following Ben's death. But we soon learn that Constance is lying to the cops, and she has of course taken the baby into her own custody after Travis helped her steal it from Hayden. Now she keeps him in her reflective room of torment. Miguel and Stacy, a noticeably much healthier couple than we've ever seen living in this house, share their affection and talk about having another baby.
We have to do something.
You're going to need help.
Moira says that while many ghosts here are sinister evildoers,
many of us are innocent, kind, blameless victims at the hands of another. And we don't want to see more suffering in this house.
So that night, when Miguel starts sleepwalking just like Ben before him, Ben puts on the rubber suit and gets into bed with Stacy. When Stacy fights back, she runs into the hallway where Beauregard is playing his part in helping the Ramos family get the hell out of there ASAP. Stacy is later scared by Gladys, as well as Mr. Exterminator. And while Miguel burns his hands on the stove, Vivian, Lorraine, Moira, and Elizabeth help him see the truth about the house way before Ben ever did. Then, for their last act, Vivian slices Ben open with a knife.
You have no idea how long I've been wanting to do that.
Ben, however, then shoots Vivian in the head.
You have no idea how long I wanted to do that.
Before they rise, and in case their message wasn't clear,
this is what it does to you. This house.
Run.
All the while, Tate tries to kill Gabriel so that he can be Violet's new boyfriend, but Violet eventually shows herself to Tate to save the kid. To give Gabe an opportunity to make a run for it, Violet gives Tate a goodbye kiss before once again vanishing to Tate. And the good-intentioned spirits succeed in driving the Ramos family out of the murder house, but of course,
another poor family's just gonna move in here.
In the next scene, Tate asks Ben if they can have another session, but Ben calls Tate a monster and says that the world shutting him out are the consequences of his actions. When Ben calls out that Tate can hardly own up for any of his wrongdoings, Tate does exactly that, taking ownership for the deaths of his classmates and of Larry, as well as for Vivian's rape. We finally then see Vivian playing her cello that was mentioned all the way back in episode 1, signifying the immense emotional toll life had taken on her post finding out about Ben and Hayden's affair. She stops playing though when she hears the crying of a baby. In the basement, she finds Nora taking care of a newborn, which happens to be the spirit of Vivian's stillborn, who Nora says actually passed away seconds after being born. Nora, who has named him Little Noisy Monster, ends up leaving the baby to Vivian after the baby is instantly quiet in her arms. At the end of their story, the Harmons and Moira decorate a Christmas tree. Then the finale concludes with a 5-minute epilogue taking place around the year 2014, 3 years after the death of the Harmons. In this epilogue, Constance reveals the surviving baby's name to be Michael Langdon. She tells her hairdresser that every loss and tragedy in her life was preparing her for her greatest role yet, and that is to be Michael's mother.
This child, a remarkable boy, destined for greatness.
When she returns home, though, her life has once again been shadowed with tragedy, as 3-year-old Michael has murdered his babysitter, and above her corpse, he smiles proudly.
Now what am I gonna do with you?
As I mentioned earlier, the actual final episode of AHS feels more like an epilogue than a proper finale, and a lot of things about it left me scratching my head. The Ramos family is fine, but I honestly don't care about them enough for them to be given so much of the episode's early focus. What we do see from the Harmons leaves a lot to be desired as well, in my opinion. I get that they wanted to scare the Ramos family into moving out as soon as possible, but I think there are many other ways to scare them than Ben literally putting on the rubber suit and getting into bed with an unsuspecting woman, and the idea that Ghost Vivian would be cool with that plan is definitely hard to believe. Similarly, the scene where she and Ben kill each other with smiles on their faces also felt out of character for them both, even though they were acting. I don't need to see Ben joyously killing Vivian. It just felt thoughtless and needlessly silly when, I don't know, we could have shown these ghosts being creative in ways that we haven't seen the previous spirits be. Another perplexing element of the finale is Tate trying to kill the teenager so that the kid could be with Violet, since she doesn't want to be with Tate. But like, why would Tate's mindset be to force Violet into an arranged marriage with someone she's barely met, and vice versa? It doesn't make sense, and it felt like at this point of the episode, the writers no longer cared about concluding its main protagonist's stories. The second half of Murder House continues to shock with several twists and unexpected character deaths, and while I still prefer the storytelling of the first 6 episodes, the decisions that were made in the second half of the season are what cemented the show in popular culture. For instance, without the twist on Violet's character or the tragic end to every member of the Harmon family, I think the show might have had a lesser impact overall, and the first season of the show's ability to continuously shock viewers throughout the season kept people tuning in, and for the most part, I think people left with. And for the most part, the season is complete and incredibly impactful. That said, 14 years later, there is a lot to be desired with the way Murder House concludes. Aside from Constance, all of our major characters are dead, with a lot of their major conflicts still unresolved, specifically with both Vivian and Violet. They are now eternally trapped within the same walls as their horrible on and off again love interests. And of course, one of the most compelling storylines introduced early on in the season, Moira's escape plan, gets completely abandoned in the second half of the season. And as you just heard, I'm also not a fan of a lot of the tonal choices of the season finale, or how Vivian's agency gets taken away from her during the last few episodes, and I was also shocked at how much it escalated the viscerality of its depictions of sexual violence when compared to the first half of the season as well. Reflecting on the season as a whole, not just the second half, an obvious highlight is the season's visuals. I especially like the visual choices made to differentiate the separate eras of the house, with the camera department, the art department, costume department, hair and makeup all coming together to really sell the atmosphere and the horror of this historical hellmouth. And of course, the casting in this season was great, arguably launching the careers of people like Evan Peters and Thaisa Farmiga, while also featuring some incredible and well-known talents like Jessica Lange, Frances Conroy, and Connie Britton to elevate their characters to their fullest potential. But even those actors without awards and acclaim behind them, like Jamie Brewer and so many of the season's guest stars, aside from some Ben and Tate moments, the acting in this season is truly top-notch. I also think the season expertly looped together tropes of haunted house horror while also creating a universe that feels extremely unique, and obviously AHS was able to build an entire expanded universe upon. Similarly, the season's similarities to Rosemary's Baby feel natural without the show trying to recreate that story beat for beat, like so many other modern day takes on Rosemary's Baby. Through Vivian Harmon's scenes and the scenes of all of the women who crossed paths with the murder house over the past century, the show presents commentary on the shared struggles of women, particularly when pertaining to marriage, pregnancy, and healthcare. With Vivian's conclusion in the second half, it also presents a bleak reality where women's autonomy and agency are stripped from them without their say. And that is the type of message that I truly love when the show pushes, because it really ties into the deeper meaning behind the show's title, American Horror Story. Additionally, there is themes of violence against women, both sexual and domestic, with several characters including Vivian, Moira, Elizabeth, Hayden, and Adelaide being victims of abuse at certain points during the season. As the season progresses and there are more instances of sexual assault scenes, the show does lose some taste and sensitivity when it comes to portraying its victims and opting not to shy away from more graphic visual depictions. Other major themes in the season are child abuse and teenage depression, with Constance obviously being sadistic with her parenting tactics, and the less in-your-face casual neglect of Ben and Vivian being too distracted by their own circumstances to notice that their daughter has been dead for 2.5 weeks, or also severely depressed long before that. The teenage depression through line is mostly portrayed through Tate and Violet, as Tate is eternally a teenager despite dying in 1994, and Violet similarly dies in this season as a teenager, but it is mostly portrayed through the lens of self-harm, and I would say throughout those scenes of Violet's self-harm, I find them to be quite repetitive and gratuitous, and it's those types of scenes alongside Patrick's unnecessarily brutal death scene had me asking whether those types of scenes were pushing boundaries for the sake of horror or purely just for shock value. And while everyone has different boundaries, it is things like that that make this a hard season for a lot of people to revisit. There's a lot going on in Murder House. Some of it handles with a lot of care and intention, while others feel a lot more like a mixed bag or like an afterthought. But given the landscape of television at the time, and the intended audience for the show, I am, of course, still against censorship. In no way do I think Disney Plus, if it ends up on Disney Plus soon, should go back and re-edit the scenes of self-harm out of this show. No, I think that would be taking it too far. I think the farthest streaming services should go is to put a warning on things that may have harsh content or triggering content. Yeah, because like I said in the first half of my video, not everybody is going to be triggered by these things. But to the people who are, you should be looking out for yourself and informing yourself and not putting yourself in bad situations. So there are two sides to every situation, but I am, again, pro-informing yourself and anti-censorship. But now let's talk a bit more specifically about some standout characters. Of course, we are focused on Ben and Vivian for a majority of the season, and I think Connie Britton as Vivian is an incredible AHS protagonist in the first half of the season who unfortunately gets severely weakened by her Antichrist pregnancy and her eventual sedation at the mental hospital. And while this certainly delivers an effective tale of a woman's life being upended by her own rape combined with her husband's infidelity, the second half of the season certainly suffers from a lack of Connie Britton. Ben, on the other hand, is an insufferable character throughout, and with everything he does in the second half of the season, he somehow becomes even more horrible. I don't like this character. He's written to be atrocious, and in my opinion, there's not much McDermott does with his portrayal of Ben to give him any likability. This season is actually full of really unlikable characters, in my opinion. Ben, Tate, Hayden, and honestly Violet most of the time, just to name a few. But speaking of Violet, let's talk about her a bit more. My problems with Violet are entirely with how she's written. I don't think the writers did much to define her outside of her feelings about her dad's affair and her relationship with Tate, which of course is troubled throughout, and for a large part of the season consists of her rehashing those same feelings of animosity towards her parents. These feelings are of course justified, but the show treats it like giving her grungy clothes and self-harm scars is enough to characterize an entire person, but I was for the most part left wanting a lot more from Violet's writing. There are, however, a couple of instances where we see a more light and human side to Violet, and that is in her interactions with Adelaide, particularly in the scene where Addie asks Violet to do her makeup. I think both Violet and Adelaide's characters could have been expanded upon greatly if the writers allowed for more scenes like this to explore some of the light within both of these ladies' extremely dark circumstances. Speaking of Adelaide Langdon, her story is definitely the hardest to watch, and her death in episode 5 held such emotional weight in the first half of the season, only for Addie to rarely get mentioned in the second half of the season. Of course, the show has so much going on at that point, but her absence was extremely noticeable. In life, Adelaide was horribly abused, tormented, bullied, and infantilized by her mother and often complete strangers, despite contextually being around her late 30s during the present-day timeline. Like her brother Beauregard, she serves the purpose of portraying the violent and controlling side of Constance, as both of these characters literally have their lives stolen from them, never once given the chance to leave home. Unlike Beau, Adelaide was eventually able to escape her mother's abuse by passing on before Constance could drag her back to the murder house, but despite her relatively happier ending, justice for Adelaide was far from served in this season. Constance herself, of course, is one of the show's most memorable and iconic villains, largely due to Jessica Lange's incredibly layered and intense portrayal of her. The more the season goes on, the more we realize that Constance has a purpose of explaining another one of the season's villains, her son, Tate Langdon, who, like his mother, is a murderer and a master manipulator. Tate, who I think I've spoke about enough, is actually portrayed in this season with way less ambiguity than I remembered. By the end of it, it's clear that his upbringing was a major source of his own mental issues, and despite Tate owning up to his biggest crimes in the end, he still is rightfully shunned by Violet by the end of the season, which I think sends a very clear message about how the audience should feel about him as well. So the fact that people were still saying Tate was possessed by the darkness of the house around the time of Apocalypse is silly, and even sillier is the way that Apocalypse reinforces that idea, but we will have to cross that bridge when we get to it. Some final character points. Moira had a great setup in the first 6 episodes, only for her storylines to get sidelined for the most part in the final 6, which is a criminal way to treat what I would call the best spirit living in the murder house. Not living, but you know what I mean. Also, the season is bloated with a lot of unnecessary and forgettable or dropped storylines, like Violet's bully Leah, Luke and Vivian's flirtations, Constance's boyfriend Travis, the LA murder cult, Joe, the property developer, and I know a lot of people like this part of the season, but the inclusion of Elizabeth Short did not add much to the season to me, and it's things like that that caused the second half of the season to lose the focus of the story a lot more often than the first half did. This rewatch of Murder House was truly enlightening to me, and I think this season and Freak Show are definitely ones I was long overdue for a reevaluation of, so Freak Show is on my mind eventually, after we get through Coven and Apocalypse. Murder House is iconic, but it also has a lot of issues. With that said, Murder House actually might not land too differently on any future rankings of the seasons that I may do in the future, because while it certainly had its high highs, the story often gets lost in the crawl spaces.
2,000 years later.
Welcome back to the Murder House Deep Dive. Today I will be taking you through some of the most atrocious episodes of AHS that are technically Murder House sequels, and they all take place within the spin-off of American Horror Story, creatively titled American Horror Stories. These 3 episodes are what I refer to as the Rubber Woman saga, as they all roughly center around a young girl whose life takes a dark turn when she tries on that godforsaken rubber suit after moving into the murder house. These episodes are far from good, but they are fun to pick apart, so sit back, relax, and let's try to understand why Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk went this direction. This show seems to have come about around the early months of the pandemic, as by May 11th, 2020, Ryan Murphy pretty much announced it through an Instagram caption. He posted a fake, and I repeat fake, fan edit of a Zoom call featuring many of the show's iconic cast members, and Murphy's caption read, "American Horror Story Cast Zoom Call, where we reminisced about the good times, the spin-off we're doing called American Horror Stories, 1-hour contained episodes. We will when we will start filming the next season of The Mothership, and other stuff I cannot print." Who's to say if a real AHS Zoom call ever actually took place during this time, and if it did, why wasn't a screenshot used from the real one? But nonetheless, by announcing this spin-off with an image including some of the show's most beloved cast members, this post definitely helped to create some high expectations in the casting department regarding who might appear in this spin-off. But spoiler alert, over the 3 seasons of stories, only 4 out of the 16 people in this image have appeared on the spin-off. Later that month, Sarah Paulson expressed interest in directing an episode of the spin-off, which is another unfulfilled expectation that fans had going in. Almost an entire year later, because pandemic, by around April of 2021, production did ramp up, and fans caught on pretty quickly that we'd once again be stepping foot in the good old murder house, because production once again shot at the now legendary Rosenheim mansion. Of course, at this time, it had only been about 3 years since the production last returned to the murder house in season 8, Apocalypse, which was, of course, a sequel crossover season between seasons 1 and 3, but we are still a bit of ways away from that deep dive, but we're getting close. Regardless, as filming continued, fans began to catch on to some of the Murder House-centric episode's cast members, including Matt Bomer, alongside AHS newcomers Paris Jackson and Sierra McCormick. Around this time, some rumors started to spread as well, including the returns of some of the most popular and notorious murder house ghosts, Violet and Tate Langdon. But in case you haven't seen the spin-off episodes, I'll keep who actually returns a surprise for now. But with the cat out of the bag about the murder house's return, the promotional campaign was free to capitalize off of 2 of the franchise's most recognizable icons in the murder house itself and that shiny rubber suit. And on July 14th, 2021, fans waited with bated breath for their first taste of AHS since 2019. And it arrived on FX, on Hulu, now on Disney Plus, I guess. And it was titled Rubber Whoa Man, Part 1. Haphazardly written by series co-creators Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk, American Horror Stories Episode 1 begins with an audio callback to young Adelaide's warning in the pilot episode. Before we meet the episode's main character, Scarlett, with hair to match her name. Her parents are Michael and Troy, played by AHS two-timer Matt Bomer and the late Gavin Creel, a celebrated actor on screen and on stage, achieving both a Tony Award and a Grammy Award over his career. Their character names are Michael and Troy, which both happen to be reused names from Murder House itself. At first I was a little bit annoyed at this detail and assumed it could have been unintentional, but I now think it's a clever Easter egg tying together the first scene of Murder House, which features the death of the character Troy, and the final scene of Murder House, in which we of course end on the homicidal tendencies of a young Michael Langdon. The Winslow family are pretty much reenacting the scene of the Harmons arriving in Los Angeles for the first time as a family, and unfortunately, you're gonna see a lot of lazy callbacks or copies and pastes, just like this one, throughout the saga. The Winslows arrive at their new home, which is of course the franchise-launching murder mansion. House. After some more shot recreations without so much of the original season's visual style and atmosphere, Scarlett mentions the house's haunted history to her dads, who then explain their plan of opening a spooky bed and breakfast to her, as if Scarlett didn't already know their plan, having just moved her entire life alongside with them.
Honey, this place is maybe the most famous haunted house on the West Coast. We're going to offer haunted getaways and haunted honeymoons and sleepover party massacres.
While unpacking a creepy doll that doesn't get any context, Scarlett is visited by Beauregard, who, despite not showing himself to her or us, rolls his familiar red ball to her. While investigating the spooky toy, a wardrobe opens itself for her, and Scarlett discovers the rubber suit. In her room, Scarlett tries it on and is scared by a rubber man apparition in the mirror, prompting her to quickly discard the suit in the dumpster. The title sequences for the spin-off series are each themed around the individual episodes, and the first 2 episodes in this Rubber Woman saga both feature these fully CGI, rubber-themed visuals atop the classic AHS theme song. It's fine, it's not my favorite. In her science class, Scarlett claims in a discussion that fear is not what stops us from doing what we truly desire.
So then what does? Shame.
After class, a posse of girls led by Maya, not dissimilar from the mean girls Violet confronted in season 1, approach Scarlett, but things go differently with Scarlett and Maya than Violet and Leah. Maya says she noticed Scarlett was staring at her in class, and she liked it.
Smart is the new perfect 10.
Whatever that means.
What was that? I think she was flirting with me.
Somehow already having a best friend at this new school named Shanti, she tells Scarlett she fears Maya is trying to pull a prank on her and she doesn't really want to pursue any romantic feelings. Back at the murder house, Scarlett has a vivid sexual fantasy of Maya that turns incredibly dark and violent as Scarlett visualizes choking a struggling Maya. That night, Scarlett is once again haunted by the Rubber Man in one of the few shots in these episodes that are actually trying to do something interesting. Awakened from the spook, Scarlett texts Maya about how neither of them are out of the closet at school, and that makes it harder for them to really talk to each other. So Maya invites her to a sleepover with her friends and promises to protect her. Like Vivian before them, Michael and Troy Winslow uncover the dark mural inside the library, but when Scarlett enters, they decide it's now the perfect time to talk about.
About a year ago, I found some pretty extreme porn on your computer. You are 16 years old, but these sites, it's just not good for your young brain to see that.
Despite Scarlett insisting her sexually violent interests are normal, her dads insist she go see a therapist.
We're not uptight. I mean, I got photos of Michael at the Folsom Street Fair from before you were born that will prove that. But there is a line when sex stops and something very dark and unhealthy starts.
Later that night, her closet door opens itself to reveal the rubber suit has once again escaped the dump. Again deciding to wear the suit, perhaps because of her new internet restrictions, and when she does put on the suit, her eyes turn completely black, as if she's being possessed. She then enters her parents' bedroom holding a kitchen knife, scaring the shit out of them before removing her mask.
Gotcha.
Oh my God.
She says she thought it was them who took the suit out of the trash and put it in her closet.
A used S&M suit? Why the fuck would we do that?
In this discussion, she somehow ends up slicing Troy's arm with the kitchen knife, and she is promptly shunned and grounded by her dads. A therapist does an at-home session with the Winslows in none other than Ben Harmon's office, during which Michael admits that he and Troy are a bit overprotective. This stems from a traumatic incident in all of their lives when Scarlett was kidnapped from the supermarket when she was 3 years old. But hold that thought. Wait a minute. Is that... Yes, indeed. The grocery store Scarlett was kidnapped from was Fields Market in its third appearance in my deep dives. This popular filming location was not only featured in AHS Cult, but also in AHS Double Feature, alongside some of my favorite non-AHS projects, including Desperate Housewives and, of course, Needs by Tinashe. Anyways, Troy explains how it all went down, and after being missing for 10 days, Scarlett was found. Her kidnapper's motive was having just lost her own daughter due to her husband murdering her. Goddamn, that is what we call a capital E exposition dump, and one that doesn't really matter all too much in the grand scheme of things. Scarlett says she doesn't remember anything from those 10 days when she was missing, but her dads worry that it might be the reason that she's now so, let's say, deviant.
Maybe. What I'm most worried about is this house.
She just heard all of that and she jumps straight to the haunted house infecting her mind. Indeed she does.
If we know what terrible things have happened in a place, then we are forced to confront the truth. That terrible things can happen at all.
Uh-huh, right.
I'm sorry we have to end.
Great timing, Dr. Grant.
I wish that kidnapper would have kept me!
So do we. Michael, sorry.
But it looks like Dr. Grant will be sticking around longer as she gets lured towards the basement, first by Beauregard's red ball, then by an apparition of Troy and Brian. Looking down into the basement, we again hear the voice of Adelaide Langdon say, which of course makes no goddamn sense, as the spirit of Adelaide has no ties to the ground of the murder house because she passed on in the street. And even if she had the choice, season 1 makes it clear she would not want to be back at that house, no matter what. But regardless, Dr. Grant gets a jump scare by the rubber man, who slices her throat and tosses her down the stairs in a similar way Tate did to Chad in season 1. Michael later discovers the rubber suit sitting in a pool of Dr. Grant's blood, so he throws it in the fireplace.
Whose blood was that? I don't know. Hers, maybe? Time of the month? What else to explain how bitchy she's been? You want to get blitzed on Xanax and edibles and watch The Crown? Oh, hell yes. Yeah,
while her dads are in an Anglophilic slumber, Scarlett sneaks out to go to Maya's sleepover, where there's all sorts of dialogue like this.
White Claw's the taste of our generation. It really says it all, doesn't it? You're a virgin? How does a lesbian determine if she's a virgin? Eating pussy. Definitely.
Long story short, Shanti was right. Maya tricks Scarlett into stripping into her lingerie and confessing her violent sexual fantasies, all the while Maya was live streaming the interaction on social media. Before things progress farther than that, Shanti interrupts them with several text messages warning Scarlett of what's really happening. Leaving in shame, she calls Shanti in her car, who warns Scarlett not to look at the comments of the live stream.
My life is over.
She later calls Maya and tells her,
I'm gonna commit suicide and leave a note saying very clearly that you guys are the reason why.
Taking the power in the situation, Scarlett refers to a similar case where the teen perpetrators got jail time, and she says she will do it unless they meet her at her house immediately. Successfully blackmailing them, these terrible teens soon arrive at, what's this place called again?
They call it the murder house.
Instructed by Scarlett to go down to the basement, the girls get got by Scarlett with the assistance of the Infantata, played in the spin-off episodes by Shane Carpenter, who also played one of the Grey People in Double Feature. Scarlett later paves up a hole in the wall to conceal the bodies. While part 1 of the Rubber Woman saga may not be entirely as terrible as I remembered it being, it is still a frustrating follow-up with an inconsistent tone that fails to blend horror and comedy, even though that's a blend that writers Murphy and Falchuk have mastered time and time again. While not doing anything nearly as egregious as the next 2 episodes, the episode has a lot of inconsistencies with the source material, Murder House. Adelaide's voice haunts the characters twice, despite her not being a ghost in the house. The episode also indicates that the rubber suit itself is haunted, opening doors and possessing the person who wears it, which certainly was not the case in season 1. The frequent appearances of the Rubberman ghost also seems to indicate that Tate may be doing his worst, which is very inconsistent with both the end of Murder House and the end of Apocalypse. With that said, on this rewatch, I definitely agree with the people that say the spin-off needs to be in a separate universe, not the same universe as the main show, and especially as parts 2 and 3 continue, I think you'll agree that that is for the best. That said, some of the episode's comedy does land, especially the scenes with Matt Bomer and Gavin Creel, and it's moments like that that make me wish they would have made these episodes a full-on satire and a parody of the show itself, which at moments these episodes do feel like it is. But then it just has really long stretches of taking itself way too seriously and also not being any good. That said, protagonist Sierra McCormick brings a lot of personality to the teen drama, and I particularly liked the costume design for her character throughout all 3 of these episodes. But the episode itself just felt mostly unoriginal, ripping off not only itself, but also that mean girl pranking the queer girl scene plays out very similarly to a very similar scene in the pilot of Scream, the TV series, which aired all the way back in 2015. The correct word for these episodes is frustrating, because you do have some really good cast members and an iconic horror location, but there are just no scares or fun inside. Part 2 begins with Kaya Gerber's acting debut as Ruby. We've flashed forward a bit, and Ruby and Scarlett, get it, red, are tormenting a familiar face, Gladys the nurse, played once again by actress Celia Finkelstein, reprising the role from season 1. After murdering this ghost, which of course does not last very long in the AHS world, Scarlett and Ruby take a bath together where Ruby cuts right to the chase.
My parents died when I was 6.
She then explains that she was left in the custody of her uncle Tony, who eventually became incredibly physically abusive towards her, until one day Uncle Tony took her to meet some people.
It was my parents. They never died. Tony wasn't my uncle. He was just some prick they sold me to when they were done with me. I didn't even cry when I saw them. I just let myself die inside.
Yeah, so as this exposition dump continues, Ruby explains what she did after discovering the truth about her parents. Knowing some of the murder house's history, Ruby then decided to go break in there and kill herself. This has to be one of the most half-assed ghost reveals I've ever seen, and it ends with Ruby trying to convince Scarlett to
kill yourself, and we can be together forever.
In bed with a pair of scissors, Scarlett gets a fright.
Hey, I'm sorry, but we need to schedule a session.
Dr. Grant is ghost killed by the ghost Mean Girls, who we learn have been trying to murder Scarlett as revenge, but lucky for Scarlett, Ruby and her pocket knife have been warding them off. Later, in a session with Scarlett, her parents, and Dr. Grant, Michael confesses that he saw the ghost of the Piggy Man. So, Michael saw the ghost of the Piggy Man, who was never actually a ghost in the murder house, but rather the visualization of an irrational fear had by one of Ben Harmon's patients based on a urban legend. What I'm trying to say is, the Piggy Man was never a ghost at the murder house, so this scene makes no sense.
A ghost with a huge pig head on it. It's an urban legend about a butcher from Chicago.
Bitch, you know the rest.
We then learn that, of course, the Winslow are in financial trouble, and the only thing holding them back from putting the house back on the market is Troy holding on to their dream of being house flippers, which is not exactly what their plan was in the last episode, but I guess it's house flipping now. Troy later meets with a contractor named Adam, played by Aaron Tveit, who has a problem with how Scarlett's patched up that wall. They get distracted and Troy and Adam start to flirt, but Michael walks in on this and says that basically anything is out of their budget. When Adam leaves, Michael gets angry at Troy for flirting, but somehow they end up kissing. Cut to Troy giving Adam head in the basement before taking a sledgehammer to the wall upstairs and revealing the bodies of the girls. Adam then kills a guy named Martin who just showed up and tries to convince Michael and Troy to keep this a secret, as this new guy Adam is convinced that flipping the murder house would boost his rep. Not only that, but he also wants to make this couple a throuple. Michael tosses Adam out the front door, where the rubber man immediately kills him. After being scared by some of the new ghosts, Michael and Troy attempt to escape through the kitchen, but they can't. We then flash back to earlier that day, where none other than Ruby killed them during the argument they were having earlier. Then, suddenly it's Halloween, and Scarlett can't find anybody in the house, but she eventually finds her parents' bodies have joined the pile in the wall.
It's okay. Now you have no excuse not to stay.
While processing the grief of their deaths with the ghost of Dr. Grant, the still living Scarlett tells her parents that she's dating their killer.
And you think we're gonna let you keep seeing her after this?
Scarlett refuses to listen to her parents or her therapist now that they're dead, so she dips.
You know what? I want the name of the other therapist who is dead in here. You're terrible.
Scarlett suits up to go to a Halloween soiree at Griffith Park, and Ruby informs her that ghosts can walk freely on Halloween. This is the last time that they will remember this, though. The Mean Girls overhear this and plot to enact their revenge on Scarlett that night at the soiree. There, Scarlett explains why she can't kill herself to be with Ruby.
I just don't know if I'm ready to give up the world yet. Promise me you won't rob me of that choice.
Ruby promises, and Scarlett asks what she wants to do tonight.
Are you kidding? I want to have a non-stop orgy of trouble and pain.
Which I guess is actually mostly dancing, because she only beats up that one guy. Eventually, Shanti appears and confronts Scarlett for ghosting her.
Or maybe she's just not into boring people anymore. I'm sorry, I'm possessive.
Scarlett tries to apologize to Shanti, but she's not really having it, and she's certain that Scarlett killed those bullies. Later, Shanti is approached by those bullies who try to beat her up with a magic wand, but Ruby stops them. I guess.
If you really loved her, you'd set her free.
In a haunted house attraction within this Halloween party, Ruby and Scarlett murder several people before the bullies try to kill Scarlett.
Run!
There's literally no flow to the second half of this episode. Everything feels incredibly disjointed, from writing to performance to editing. And after a terrible chase scene, Scarlett gets away and hides until dawn, when she walks Ruby back to her place of confinement. On the front lawn, the bullies stand down to let Scarlett profess her truth to Ruby, that she won't be returning to the murder house ever again, and she needs to live her life. So Scarlett bids adieu to her dads, looks intently at a decorative butterfly that will come up again for some reason, before meeting Ruby downstairs for an emotionally moving goodbye.
You're the only person in my life whose suffering brings me no pleasure.
Same.
The episode concludes with an epilogue showing us Scarlett's life 10 months later, where she's given herself a hardcore makeover and communicates with her ghost friends via cell phone. She tells Ruby she tracked down Ruby's abusive quote-unquote uncle, and after hanging up, she suits up, rings the doorbell, and wastes no time. Back at the murder house, things are pretty amicable between the spirits that are choosing to show themselves, or rather, the spirits that the show had the budget to bring back. Ruby then narrates how she had to wait every year on Halloween till Scarlett would show up, which makes no sense because Scarlett just said she would never show up to the murder house ever again. And if she was so comfortable returning to the murder house, she could do that any time and the ghosts would be there. But it would make sense for Ruby to go meet up with Scarlett out in the real world, since Halloween is the only day she can fucking leave. So why would she waste the whole day on Halloween waiting around for Scarlett? And damn, Scarlett, why couldn't you show up before dusk? Ugh. Part 2 of the Rubber Woman saga decides to add a new major character in Ruby, and let's just say things definitely take a turn. I won't hate too much on Kaya Gerber's acting, but this episode, especially compared to her other performances, feels like it may have been her first time ever reciting lines. To her credit, the lines are not that great to begin with. The episode is just as poorly written as the previous one, with absolutely no flow and really long exposition dumps. And of course, the show continues to make more inconsistencies with the main show, this time including the ghost of the Piggy Man in the murder house, and just the perplexing way neither Scarlet nor Ruby seem to understand how Halloween works for ghosts, despite every other ghost in the murder house still behaving like they should on Halloween. For some reason, they just don't get it. And it's never explained. And of course, no other big-name ghosts from season 1 appear. No Moira, no Tate, no Violet, no Vivian, no Ben, none of them. The whole advertising and the result of this first season of the spin-off just felt like a bit of a cheap way to trick fans into thinking they would be getting another genuine, in-depth exploration of the murder house as they did in both seasons 1 and 8, only to be served something that feels like a low-budget Disney Channel original movie rated TVMA. Whoa, I almost fell with the house on my head. Okay. But now we are about to venture into one of the most baffling episodes in the greater AHS universe, so prepare to be confused. With that said, I'll try to make as much sense out of this episode as I can. I'll even note on the screen which timeline we are currently in, since the show switches perspectives 3 times. So keep that in mind before you get too attached to the sense that I'm trying to make of each scene. On top of that, this episode also incorporates characters from the Rubber Woman episodes and attempts to conclude that storyline again. Somehow written by series co-creators Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk, the episode broadly revolves around a game designer, Michelle, who is making a video game based on her son's favorite TV show, American Horror Story. So the episode takes place within a universe where the show AHS exists, and the events within it are not necessarily real, but that line between reality and fiction will quickly blur. Starting with the video game timeline, the episode starts with an early version of the aforementioned video game, where its plot is that you must survive a night at the murder house, which you've rented as a part of a horror-themed Airbnb experience. The video game itself also does not take place in the AHS universe either, as we soon learn that the show exists here too.
The Lollery Mansion in New Orleans.
Anyways, our playable character is Connie, played by Noah Cyrus, sister of Miley, and Dylan, played by Adam Hagenbuch.
Hagenbuch.
Oh, what?
Hagenbuch.
Okay.
Hagenbake.
I like that one. Their names are, of course, references to the actors who played Vivian and Ben Harmon, Connie Britton, and Dylan McDermott. These two make about an AHS reference a second, so I will not be making note of them all, but I gotta mention Ryan and Brad defending Roanoke's honor a bit here.
Binge watch Roanoke.
Why does Sarah Paulson should talk that season? It's so good.
Do you really want to go watch Roanoke?
For some reason, this game that Michelle designed for her son involves role-playing as Tate and Violet having sex, including the character of Dylan finishing early.
Sorry.
Afterwards, that infamous red ball rolls into their room, so they head downstairs where they meet Gladys. However, in this episode, she is played by stunt performer Kelly Rosine, who also did stunts for Gladys in the Rubber Woman episodes, and she also was a stunt performer in an episode of AHS 1984. In-game, Gladys leads Connie and Dylan to the basement, where they meet 3 girls who are being kept prisoner. As the audience, we do not know these characters in-universe until we get a cutscene that gives us their backstory. And in the first big guest appearance of the episode, Dylan McDermott himself returns as a very peculiar and of course non-canonical version of Ben Harmon. After approaching the murder house on Halloween, Ben Harmon tells the girls to
leave now or else.
But they don't, and after sneaking inside, they are jump-scared by a piggy man before finding none other than Ruby.
Welcome to Murder House.
Yeah, girl, we know. The girls are then murdered by both the Piggy Man and the Rubber Man, and after Connie is informed about their backstory, she tells them,
if you die here, you're trapped here forever.
Damn, that kind of sucks for you guys. The Infantada appears, played by Shane Carpenter for the second time, and he scratches Dylan. Dylan saves Connie from the Infantada before being killed in the most unpredictable way possible.
I told you, dumb bitch, you're gonna die in here.
Connie asks the obvious question,
What are you doing here? You died on the street!
To which in-game Addie says that all the spirits have gathered for a special occasion.
The day you die.
No matter how egregiously silly this entire opening scene is, Jamie Brewer is great for doing this cameo, and this is a rare bright spot in the episode, which outside of this moment mostly fails at being a parody of itself. Wasting no time, Connie disarms Addie, but at the stairs, she is met by some major antagonists from seasons past. Bloody Face from Asylum, and Twisty the Clown from Freak Show. Connie flips Bloody Face away, but glitches out long enough to meet her maker.
You were killed by Twisty.
In the real world, we finally meet Michelle, the game's designer, and her son, Rory, who complains about the gameplay and the inaccuracy to the show.
But have you even ever actually watched the show?
Even casual fans of the show are going to be pissed because Addie's a ghost there, and there are other characters from other seasons who have no business being there.
As increasingly meta as this episode gets, this line could be referencing the fact that Addie's voice can be heard as one of the spirits in the house in the 2 Rubber Women episodes, which had premiered earlier in the summer of 2021, which also of course had those similarly confusing inclusions of the Piggy Man that we talked about earlier. If that's true and Ryan and Brad wrote this episode in response to their own fuck-ups in episodes 1 and 2, I honestly don't even know what to say.
But it's scary.
Michelle then explains how desperate she is for this game to work out, since she's been contracting programmers outside of her garage, out of pocket, and now their financial stability depends on this game's success.
I didn't ask you to do any of this.
Michelle is completely unwilling to learn more about the show by watching it at this point, despite claiming to be making this game to bond with her son. Because of this, Rory leaves to stay with his father. The episode then cuts to a video game themed title sequence, which is fun, but could have been pushed a little bit further in my opinion. Afterwards, Michelle finally decides to watch AHS, finishing Murder House in one night and taking detailed notes. We then see a real-world realtor showing her the Rosenheim mansion, where he reveals something really perplexing.
They found 9 bodies in the house a year or so ago.
Michelle then name-drops Ruby McDaniel, which means that the events of the Rubber Woman episode happened in the same universe that Michelle and Rory are living in. But of course this makes no sense, since in the Rubber Woman episodes, the characters reference the events of Murder House as fact and not fiction. It also makes no sense because Ruby McDaniel herself appears in Michelle's game, and Michelle was shown to have had the option to view the Rubber Woman episodes on her TV. So here's what I think is maybe going on in this second world, which is again not the final world that we are landing on, so don't get too attached. I think what might be going on is this part of the episode could be trying to retcon the first 2 Rubber Woman episodes and place them in a separate universe alongside this episode, where AHS is a TV show with some unexplained overlaps into the real world, including perhaps the real person Ruby haunting the game and the characters from the show similarly haunting the real world later in the episode. But because this episode, and likely its script, are so confusing, I imagine not a lot of the people working on this episode could really keep track of what's supposed to be real or not. So I could be reading too much into the details of the spin-off being available on the TV and stuff like that. But all of this requires way too much connecting dots with episodes of television that aren't particularly engaging themselves. So the result is an episode that is truly baffling for a viewer to wrap their heads around in one sitting. But I digress. Because of the 9 bodies, Michelle offers to buy the mansion for only $100K, for research I guess, despite already having a very good replica of the house inside her game.
You're mine. I am going to make you reveal all your secrets to me.
Girl, we just saw you take detailed notes on the entire first season. You already have a detailed model of the house and most of its characters. I think you can cook up a pretty good game without buying the literal house. On Halloween, we see the ghosts of the murder house leaving the house one after the other. I know you've been dying to see some of the ghosts we haven't seen yet, but instead we see Gladys, the Piggy Man, and the Rubber Man again. But there is one new addition in the group, as the exterminator, who died all the way back in episode 10 of Murder House, is also included in a detail I appreciate. I mean, it's better than him not being there. Behind them are the mean girls who Scarlett and Ruby and the ghosts killed after the live streaming humiliation of Scarlett at the sleepover. So this is what I'm talking about. These are the unexplained overlaps of the fictional TV show and this real world, which Michelle herself is amazed and perplexed by. She's stopped at the porch by Ruby, who she doesn't recognize from her game, which I guess confirms that itself was a haunting or an overlap. Ruby quickly casts Michelle aside when Scarlett arrives, still in her badass era. The two kiss and head inside, which again makes no sense, since this is the one day Ruby can leave this house and Scarlett swore she'd never return here, and so on and so forth. Michelle follows them inside, but suddenly she can't find a soul. In the bathroom, though, Scarlett and Ruby are bathing together again, and Scarlett asks Ruby if she had the choice to put her soul to rest.
Would you?
But Ruby says that she would not, because she wants to spend forever with Scarlett.
My life is basically just waiting for Halloween to roll around every year.
Girl, that makes no sense. You could sneak into the house at any day of the year and hang out with her just like you're doing right now. In the kitchen, Beauregard's ball makes its zillionth appearance, and Michelle eventually comes across Ben Harmon, who is sobbing in his office.
I usually only cry like this after I masturbate.
Pardon?
Michelle tells Ben she won't actually go through with the deal on the house since she's broke, but she's lying to the realtor just to gain access to the house for a tiny amount of time for research. Sure, I guess, but I'd prefer if any of this made sense. Finally addressing the elephant in the room, that she just watched a whole season of TV starring this guy, she asks if he comes in here every year to prank fans of the show, assuming he is the actor, not the character. But she is, in fact, dealing with the character, and Ben says,
I'm in hell.
Ben then monologues about cheating on Vivian with Hayden, and Michelle starts to realize that this is not Dylan McDermott. And Michelle just goes with this and tries to therapize Ben, before asking what it's like firsthand to experience the house, for research for the game, of course. Michelle then comes across a couple of shades of red.
As your therapist, my professional opinion is that you should run like hell.
What?
But Michelle is not fast enough as a tall infantata trips her and Scarlett and Ruby kill her. We then flash forward to the following Halloween when Ghost Michelle visits Rory, who is still pissed.
Your stupid fucking obsession got you killed.
The episode then takes a turn because we gotta get to a conclusion somehow.
There is no escaping the murder house.
I think there is.
How?
Fire.
Yeah, right.
Michelle says that means she'll be gone forever, and Rory's like, that's fine by me, and the plan moves forward. At dusk on November 1st, Rory pulls up to the murder house with a wheelbarrow of gasoline.
I do not need this shit today.
Michelle gets jump scared by Dr. Grant, who isn't afraid to say what she thinks about the other therapist in the house.
Quite frankly, he's just not that good. I'm available anytime.
Ruby tries to stop Rory, but Ben and Maya and the other girls hold her back because they all want to move on and not be trapped here for eternity.
Sorry, not sorry.
But Scarlett is sent on the rescue when she receives a text from Ruby, but her rescue efforts are futile and the murder house is set ablaze in whatever universe we are in.
Die with me!
Girl, you suck to keep asking her to die when she keeps saying she doesn't want to. And yeah, she still doesn't want to.
So the ghosts weren't the problem. It was the damn TV show fans that kept coming here at all hours to take selfies. Hey, assholes, it's just a house.
But don't worry, guys. I'm sure you were scared that 1 year flash forward was the end. But no, there's somehow 9 minutes left and another entire epilogue to get through that is set 3 years later. Instead of focusing on Michelle and Rory, though, we're focused on the slightly more memorable Scarlett and Ruby. The property of the murder house has been developed into condos, and Scarlett is one of the first buyers. She unpacks her two belongings with weird, unspoken sentimental value, that doll and a framed butterfly, and after being convinced that Ruby's spirit was lost forever, Ruby eventually does show herself to Scarlett. Ruby says that all of the other spirits did choose to move on, including Ruby's dad's, and Scarlett was the only one who stayed back.
Success. You escaped Murder House.
Uh-oh, we've now entered a secret third timeline, the actual real world. That's right, at the last minute, the episode pulled another bait and switch, and if you thought you'd made sense of the episode, none of it was actually real. It was actually the second version of Michelle's AHS-themed video game that Rory was playing through for the first time.
It's so much better. It's super cool, and I'm really proud of you.
How sweet. In this third epilogue, Rory asks if she thinks any of the spirits from the game could escape into the real world now that the house is burned down in the game, I guess. And when they leave their house, we see that it seems that the in-game version of Beauregard did exactly that, I guess. Man, that shit was terrifying. When I ranked all of the episodes of American Horror Stories, I initially ranked this episode above the other two Rubber Woman episodes for the sake of it being more entertaining, but I take that back. I hate this episode. It is too hard to understand no matter how many times you try to. I don't think there is a right answer. It honestly feels like a freestyle writing exercise with no revisions. Even more so than the Rubber Woman episodes, this episode tries to be a parody. And yeah, it works occasionally, but the focus of the episode is actually those overlaps with the show and the real world, which is at the very end then revealed to be the plot of the game within the show itself. Having that reveal at the end also makes the resolution with Scarlett and Ruby, if that's her name, yep, makes it completely irrelevant and not, like, real. What was the point of even bringing them back? Again, I think if they abandoned most of the Inception stuff and focused on making a really tongue-in-cheek parody of the show and even the fan base itself, which, you know, this episode still does not hold back from at all, but it would have been a lot more successful if they just went all in with the, you know, like, comedy angle and not try to make some real family drama in the middle of all that nonsense. Dylan McDermott and Jamie Brewer's scenes were actually funny, but oftentimes in a so random that it's funny kind of way, which is just cheap comedic writing in my opinion. But the episode's actual narrative is incomprehensible and not in a way that, like, oh, it's supposed to be ambiguous. No, it just doesn't make any damn sense. It doesn't make sense on your first watch. It doesn't make sense on your second watch. And I don't even know if the assumptions that I've made in this video are what it's trying to communicate in some instances. But again, the ending of the episode means that none of it matters at all. So in terms of where does this episode take place within the AHS universe, I believe that that very final scene with Michelle and Rory's world, that is the closest version to our real world that the show has ever shown us, and everything before that is the plot of the video game. And I believe that Michelle and Rory's real world is a different universe than the universe that most of the episodes of American Horror Stories take place in. So basically, there's the main show's timeline. Don't get me started on parallel universes or time travel and shit like that. But there's the main show's timeline. There's the spin-offs timeline, which I would include Rubber Woman in there with most of the other episodes of American Horror Stories. And then there's the Michelle and Rory's real world universe timeline, if that makes sense. Don't blame me, blame them for doing this. In the end, the spin-offs Murder House-centric episodes were major letdowns to lots of fans and set off a particularly rocky period in the AHS fandom, as it was followed by a similarly disappointing double feature. And 4 years later, I would not say the show has recovered, and nowadays it feels like it might have given up. But alas, thank you so much for making it to the end of my extended, extra long Murder House deep dive. My feelings with season 1 are complex, so I just wanted to express my honest opinions through this video and hope it can help you work through some of your own complex opinions about season 1 of AHS, as well as that terrible spin-off. But yeah, from now on, let's just not talk about that. I want to give a big thank you to Mantis Sleep for sponsoring this video. Remember, you can use code SKYGUY at checkout to get 10% off your order at mantisleep.com. With that, make sure you leave a comment below letting me know some of your Murder House thoughts, and I will see you next time.